uh, what would be kind of first things that they did, as the three of y'all envision them? And Chris, we don't actually know your opinion on Space Guard, so tell us that in a second. But George, what's the first thing we do if there is a Space Guard? What is there? You mentioned a list of big objects. Is that the first thing they do, or is it something else that they do?
So there's a whole list of potential activities, many of which would have defensiveness or pushback or concern or issues associated with them. So let's start with the easiest ones. And so let's start by plugging holes or by collaborating and cooperating amongst the existing other departments and agencies, but in a way that has a clearly identified focal point or a lead entity now that is speaking on behalf of the United States government, both to corporate America and to the international community. And so, yes, I think there's a number of things that we could start by authorizing and continuously supervising. And again, we haven't done that. And is it a problem? Well, okay, starting next week, yeah, it could be a problem.
Could be a problem.
This is not to criticize any individual companies or how they're doing it, but because no one has clearly authorized and no one is clearly supervising in a way that I think was intended by the treaty, rather than just, well, here's a bunch of state vectors, you can go look at it and see if there's a problem. Then I think that would provide a good example for the community, and we'd start to gather some momentum about tackling some of the more difficult challenges.
Okay. Peter, same question, first steps?
Well, so I think, the fundamental question is, does the American people want the Space Force to be the Space Guard, or do they want a separate Space Guard? Because those come with costs and trade-offs. And, I'm skeptical that, for every attempt at consolidation, you create a fragmentation and vice versa. So, it's not clear that all the consolidation under the Department of Homeland Security, was that great. And nor is it clear that creating a separate, Space Guard agency is not going to create its own set of, problems with how it would integrate with U.S. Space Command that has operational, command of the space domain, or whether or not they would, fall under it in some important manner. But obviously, the first thing you'd have to do is to create enabling legislation, and then they would have a period like the Space Force, probably longer, because the Space Force came with a bunch of personnel and a lot of baggage in terms of its culture. But they'd have to get their feet underneath them. They'd have to create a bureaucracy. They'd have to start arguing for budget, and of course, they would have to. I think the first thing they would be called to do is what they've already been called to do, which is to start thinking about space traffic management. And so, whether or not that is privatized or belongs to the government, at some point in time, you'd have to start thinking about, what they would need to do that, and eventually to do active debris remediation or any kind of law enforcement. If you have, somebody who's violating, an FCC or an orbital slot, or laundering money in a way, they would need actual capabilities to go and apprehend that object. Well, that's going to be unbelievably expensive and take a while for them to secure that. The alternative is just to amend the National Defense Authorization Act and give those authorities in a single line to the U.S. Space Force, and tell them that they are effectively the Space Guard. And by the way, I have no problem renaming Space Force Space Guard. I think that is better branding, since they're guardians anyway.
Right.
But the name change isn't necessarily required. All that's required is that you put things that are already in policy into legislation. So, they would be responsible for protecting the lines of communication, and space security, and you might want to get specific because if you think they'd be slow to realize the implications of this, you might want to be very clear that that specifically includes planetary defense, specifically includes space debris removal, specifically includes search and rescue, specifically includes certain types of licensing, right? Well, of course, that's going to create a demand for services, and so you're going to have to increase their budget. On the bright side, they already own the space domain awareness assets and are extending them into cislunar. On the bright side, they already do conjunction warning. And on the really bright side, they already have an existing command center that's integrated with the other elements of national power. Now, what you probably also want to do is to create those same operational responsibilities for US Space Command, and you want to put representatives from the agencies that matter, FCC, DOT, Department of Commerce, NASA, in prominent positions in an interagency cell in US Space Command, and you want them to be as much as possible born joint, such that it's a whole of nation approach to space. But I think, and let me point out that the Space Force is likely already building capabilities that would approximate the kind of patrol cars to go and pull somebody over, apprehend the guilty, or to do salvage or debris removal. And for the most part, they've already spent that money, and those assets will hopefully be completely idle when there's no war. So you can have a completely idle, largely mysterious and secret force of space fighters out there doing nothing on your tax dollar, or you can have a bunch of Coast Guard cutters that are essentially identical, that every day are showcasing, wow, the United States is really, really good at cleaning up space debris and really, really helpful at maintaining safety of lines of commerce. Maybe we don't want to mess that up. And maybe that's not somebody we want to anger because they've got clear capabilities. So those are, I think, the two ways forward.
Just a quick comment on that. Excellent points. I would point out, in terms of the space traffic management piece specifically, if you talk to the user community, I think it's pretty unanimous that what is being done now in terms of the completeness of the catalog, the accuracy of the information, and the timeliness of the warnings, as well as the many false positives, if you will, is not meeting user needs. And so the challenge, if we go that direction, is to figure out how to change the culture so that's not just all done inside for military purposes, but it's collaborative and it's innovative, and it is something that works with industry, not contracting with industry to meet military needs. And that'll be a challenge if you try to do it in-house.
So let me just address that, because I think those are very cogent points. So one of the reasons why that is that the U.S. Space Command assumed that as sort of a duty of responsibility for its own reasons, but it was never given that authority or mission. So wasn't a part of its identity, right? So obviously you can change part of that with legislation, but then you have to consider the fact that no matter who does it, to do it right requires resources. Now to the second point, George, I think there is a very interesting sort of halfway position, which is the Space Force is not a monolithic entity. It has a number of these sub-deltas, right? And you could actually have a subcomponent of the Space Force that was Space Guard Command. And you'd take the same Space Force personnel, but you would put them under that particular thing, with that particular thinking, that authority, working specifically with civilians. And that would be a component that would report directly to US Space Command. And they could use the same assets that might be classified in one area, but would be public facing in another. So and I sort of like that idea because I think that I have a bureaucratic bet I would make, which is that over time, the Space Guard is going to be the larger component of whatever this is, right? The major part of Starfleet in the future is not going to be space fighters and certainly not going to be space bombers.
Right.
It's going to be Coast Guard cutters and their contract Coast Guard cutters, the Merchant Marine. And so in my view, the Space Force faces a very stark choice of being the big dog or the little dog. Because while in the long term, the needs of the space economy and the protection of the space economy is likely to be a much larger endeavor and a much better funded endeavor because of its direct contribution, to global GDP, than the eventuality that we might attack each other's satellites, and the diminishing role of government-owned assets in providing space information services to the globe as commercial assumes even more of that.
Terrific. I agree 100% on that last part. Chris, I don't actually have a good handle on your position on Space Force, on Space Guard, the proposed Space Guard, or the debris elements. Can you fill me in? I mean, I've known Peter and George for a long time, but you're new to me, and I actually would really be interested in knowing where you all stand on this.
Yes, certainly. I mean, let's take a step back from the different avenues and uses of space. Go anywhere in the world, people are wearing, teenagers and people in their 20s are wearing NASA t-shirts. NASA is America's greatest soft power asset. People also all over the world pay attention to SpaceX, and commercial spaceflight is seen as American. Space activities are, commercial space activities are seen as American space activities. At the same time, the U.S. wants to go back to the moon with Artemis and the Artemis program and the Artemis Accords and get states to sign on to the Artemis Accords. We're also trying to sway discussions at COPUOS on space resources and lead the rest of the world on how we see space governance in the next century, whether it's space resources or space debris or long-term sustainability. We have all these ambitions of leading the world, and we have the greatest. When people think of space, they think of NASA. In movies and everything like that. So folks around the world will notice if we're trying to get folks to sign on to the Artemis Accords and see what our behavior should be on the moon, and yet at the same time, America is also standing up a military space force and saying that the U.S. should dominate outer space, which is formally prohibited in international law. We cannot dominate zones outside of state territory. Consequently, rhetoric really, really, really matters. All of those things are made more difficult if you have a space force, to the point that, people will even make Netflix series making fun of it. So branding really, really matters. And if you were to rename something like this merely as Space Guard, and do some of the things that you wanted to do anyway, include, and that, I leave that up to the other folks. Maybe it is space debris remediation, capturing space debris. Maybe it is planetary defense. And you talk to the planetary defense folks, and they say that we need space-based observation, space-based monitors, and space-based responses to neo threats. If we see incoming asteroid that's 5 days out, 5 hours out, 5 months out, we need the assets already in space. There are legitimate arguments that is not NASA's job, or it could be a shared NASA and Space Guard job. And I think that there are things to do which the rest of the world would see as beneficial, as helpful, as being a good participant in globalized space activities, and see it in a way that is merely better than Space Force. So I think that maybe that shows you how I feel.
Yeah, no, I like that. This is this feels like, we already know that the world is watching, and we usually do this acknowledgement for folks that are not in the U.S. and not American. When we put this program together, this original Blue Marble Week, and then now the Conversations for the Future, because of the Foundation for the Future's focus on building some American legislation. This it tends to be an American-centric topic, but we acknowledge that this is a global, what we do here has global implications. So, Chris is a ISUer, I'm an International Space University. We have 2 or 3 others that have been on the calls at different times. I think we kind of share we are the world Starfleet perspective on how to build space stuff. So I'm speaking for myself on that, but I think it is important to note that NASA has a great brand. Space Force maybe doesn't have a great brand, but is doing important work. It's a fascinating conversation with the 3 of y'all. I would love to kind of keep going on it. Does anybody have any, we only have 2 more minutes. We need to make a smooth transition. Does anybody have any last thoughts or ahas or epiphanies they want to share with the team?
So, certainly, I think it's unfortunate that we had the continuing influence of the Air Force in even the naming of the Space Force as the Space Force. It would have been better to have been Space Guard or Starfleet. I think it's important that it transitioned from being a corps to eventually being a fully independent service that has the kind of bureaucratic chops to take care of the space domain. But I just want to point out that this idea that militaries, have inherently bad branding, I think is untrue. You look at what the airlift part of the U.S. Air Force, has done, globally in terms of providing, supplies. Navies provide humanitarian relief all the time, and we should remember the example of the British Navy. The British Navy, was sort of the force for good. In the colonial period, they were the ones that undid the slave trade, stopped slave trading, period. They, stopped the piracy. They stopped the white slavery of the Barbary pirates. They explored, worldwide, and they were, seen as this, legitimate authority, force. And so I think that, you can choose to have a space force, whatever you call it, whose only jobs are attack and defense, or you can choose to have a space force that protects planet Earth, that has a capability against asteroids and one-day comets, that keeps the lines of navigation, free and safe, that maintains commerce free against coercion, that makes sure that folks are the right players, that essentially acts as a space guard. And that's a choice, a choice that I hope the Space Force that the actual Space Force will embrace, and that I hope the American people will embrace and will require of its Space Force.
Awesome. Thank you all very much. We need to switch over. Really appreciate your time and wisdom here. It's fun having y'all. Thank you very much. I'm passing it over to Lee. Hey, Nora.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris, Pete, and George, for your thought leadership, your communication, and your willingness to express healthy disagreement on deeply important topics. And thank you, Michael, for moderating the panel.
I want to point out to Dan that we've had Starfleet referenced 3 times today. So just letting you know that. All right, I'm out. Bye, y'all.
All right. If you're enjoying today's programming, please consider helping us cover the cost of Conversations for the Future through a sponsorship or donation. We are a nonprofit organization that depends on your generosity. Next up, we have a special segment, Saturday Space, where we enjoy things you might do on a Saturday in space: entertainment, recreation, sports, and the arts. And Inara Tabir is our guest, but we have a special surprise guest as well. So I'll introduce them both and then we'll enjoy our conversation. So Inara Tabir is CEO of Galaxis Aerospace, co-host of Cosmic Waves on IROC Radio, and chair of the board of Gaze in Space. Her work brings together science, sci-fi, and activism. Inara has been involved in the New Space, Open Space movement for 15 years, and I'm suspecting it went a lot farther back than that. She sees the space industry as a giant puzzle to be solved and connects people and organizations in order to complete the bigger picture of what we are capable of as a species. Besides being the CEO of Galaxis Aerospace, she is the co-host of Cosmic Waves on IROC Radio in her persona as the Galaxis Gal, examining the culture of space, talking about where we are going and how we are getting there. She sits on the board of various space organizations where she works to make space and space assets more engaging and accessible. As the chair of the board of Gaze in Space, Inara combines LGBTQIA+ activism with moving us toward a multiplanetary future. Besides work, Inara enjoys old jazz and new books. And Inara, thank you for bringing Dan with you. This is exciting. After nearly 2 decades in the entertainment industry, veteran producer, host, journalist, and celebrity interviewer, Dan Deevy stepped away from Hollywood to build a 501c3 nonprofit organization specializing in activism and advocacy for the inclusion of the LGBTQ+ community in entertainment, particularly in the often prophetic realm of science fiction. The whimsically titled, here we go again, Gaze in Space, strives to relieve ignorance, promote a better understanding of LGBTQ+ individuals, and empower LGBTQ+ youth by exposing them to visions of the future where universal equality has finally become a reality, and most importantly, where they see themselves reflected on screen. Thank you so much both for being here, and you take over the screen and tell us all about it.
Oh my goodness. Dan, can we get Lee at our next convention?
You know,
love that.
I was going to say, I have never been so happy by how someone has said our name before. I mean, normally I do it once, and then the rest of the time I don't commit. Lee, you committed. Thank you. That was fantastic.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. And 3 times. I mean, let's get her at one of our conventions for sure. Thank you so much, Lee. I am so pleased to be here. I love what you're doing with Conversations for the Future. So it's nice that we get to present here. I have, as you said, I've been working in the space world for a while, but most recently I have been working with sci-fi groups, and, Dan's Gaze in Space organization is one of the most rewarding that I've had the chance to work with. I started my company Galaxis Aerospace 15 years ago because I saw this disconnect between the public and the space industries. Most people that I talked to thought we either had warp drive and aliens secretly in some government facility, or we were 1,000 years away from space, and they weren't really engaged, but they were engaged with Hollywood and the sports industries. They were willing to spend their money and to make it a priority, and they got where they could connect with it. So my mission really is to help people find an entrance into this world and find some way that it can impact them and they can understand it. So sci-fi is really the natural choice there. Sci-fi it's an art form that has inspired so many scientists and space innovators. Elon Musk is a huge Trekkie, and for good reason. But on the other side, we have science advisors in Hollywood now. So we have this symbiotic loop that's happening, and Hollywood is taking full, benefit of this. I think it's time that the space industry really, lock into this benefit also. So, at Gaze in Space events, we're now bringing science organizations. We were able to host, Foundation for the Future at our recent convention. And it was amazing to see the excitement people were there, dressed as aliens and there to get autographs, but then suddenly we threw science into the mix and people were just ecstatic about it. So I want to see more of this attachment. I would love to see every sci-fi convention have an expectation of bringing real science to the table. And the Roddenberry Foundation could be really centered to that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dan, because I think that really the story of how all of this got started on his side is something that's critical.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Inara. And thank you all so much for having me here. Being able to present today is incredibly special, and I'm just really, really thrilled to be here. So thank you all. Especially given the fact that Gaze in Space was supposed to be a one-time thing. Gaze in Space is an organization that began because in 2016, the movie Star Trek Beyond was released. And it was the very first time in over 50 years of the franchise history to have a gay character on screen. Up until this point, there were no gay people acknowledged in the future. People who know Star Trek, the famous story of Whoopi Goldberg seeing Nichelle Nichols as Lieutenant Uhura in the original Star Trek series. And she credits the fact that she became Whoopi Goldberg to Nichelle being there, because Nichelle, as a proud, smart, Black woman communications officer on the bridge of the Enterprise, working with this multiracial group of people as an equal, showed her that she will make it into the future. She survives. And that's something that Star Trek did for virtually every minority group except for the LGBTQ plus community. We were never represented. So over the years, there were stories people would postulate as to why you had never seen a gay person in Star Trek. And some lesser evolved folks came up with the theory that, it's been cured by the 23rd century. That's why you've never seen a gay person, like nobody has cancer anymore either. So it was cured. And when I heard that the first time, my jaw hit the ground, and I thought the worst thing about this hypothesis is that if you were to accept the fact that this person believes being gay is somehow a problem, somehow it's wrong, if you take that to be true, then their explanation was completely valid. It worked out logically, and that terrified me. So the moment that argument was finally put to bed by seeing Sulu as a gay man with a husband and a daughter in this movie in 2016 meant everything to me. As a lifelong fan of Star Trek and as a gay man, seeing that just meant so much. But no one else was really talking about it. And I found that very strange. So I was headed to the big Star Trek convention in Las Vegas that year as a member of the press to cover it. And so I decided to throw a party. Had no idea if anybody else was going to care, if anybody thought it was as big of a deal as I did. But I thought, you know what, if it ends up being me and 5 friends toasting this moment, then that's what it'll be. Well, it turned out to be a lot more than that. And we actually had one of the actors from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Nana Visitor, who plays the first officer, Major Kira. She came to the party. And I remember her telling me, Dan, I can come, but I could probably only stay for like 20 minutes. And I said, oh my God, just having you there is going to mean the world to us. Thank you so much. She stayed for 3.5 hours. And the next day, she found me at the convention and said, Dan, whenever you decide to do this again, I'm there. That was amazing. We need more of this. I'm there. So at that point, I thought, oh God, I guess this is what I do now? Because if Nana Visitor wants more parties, I'm going to plan more parties. And so what was supposed to be a single event has now turned into, it's been 5 years, and we have done close to 200 events now, both in real life. We've done a ton of virtual stuff since the pandemic hit. Over 60 to 70 celebrity guests have come to support us. 10 to 15,000 fans have come, and it has grown into a full nonprofit organization. We're a 501c3 registered nonprofit. And with each new event, we're meeting more and more people in the community, people who didn't realize that there were other people out there like them. And the importance of the organization became most clear to me when when I happened to meet my fiance, because I threw these parties and he came to one. And so if that didn't speak volumes right there as to the effectiveness of enhancing people's lives by bringing a community, by showing them that they have a community out there that they never knew about, has been amazing. So as more and more events have happened, as we've built more support, we've met incredible people like Anara. And when I met Anara, that was the game changer. That was the, wow, everything you guys are doing is amazing. Have you ever thought about expanding what you're doing into the actual space industry and the sciences? And that was exactly what we wanted to do. We just didn't know how to make that happen. Anara does, and Anara has. So we are in this whole new, we're really kind of in phase 2 of Gaze in Space. Phase 1, establishing ourselves, building this community, building this network of people, both celebrities and fans. And I mean, we've had people come to our parties who are neither gay nor Trekkies. Figure that out. Like, that still boggles my mind, because it is such an inclusive, loving environment that once you're there, you're just like, whoa, this is what it should be like. This is what the future should be like. And so we want to continue what we've been doing, push it into phase 2, which is making the future that Roddenberry shows us in Star Trek a reality. And one of the things that Anara said recently, it was a quote that, and I'm going to butcher it, I apologize, but it was to the effect that as Star Trek fans, when we turn off the episode, that's when our involvement in the show really begins, because we have to live our lives and make a difference today to make that future that we love so much a reality. And the work that we're doing now is bringing us to that. So clearly we love Anara. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Dan. You know, honestly, I could talk about the practical benefits of getting the exposure that the Star Trek world could bring to the space world, but we're looking at this James Webb situation about, people are calling for the renaming and talking about the lavender scare. I'm a transgender person, and I'm in this community. And even now there's a lot of issues with LGBT acceptance in the space world. It's getting better, but I think the greater benefit that we could find out of organizations like what Dan has built, Gaze in Space, is we can move the needle further. So oftentimes the space world is hard and people have their heads down and they have huge projects and timelines and they're worrying about funding. And so innovation can move really fast on the tech side, but it can move really slow on the social side. What I want to do is infuse it. So we bring in media, we bring in the capture of the fandoms and the vision. Art is really the vision that can move science forward. From the very beginning, in fact, cave people were drawing on walls and they were scratching into the rock moons and stars. So from the very beginning, that space has inspired art, but then art has inspired us as we look up and we look at this art that's showing us the stars. We're like, well, how can we get there further? So it's a symbiotic dance. Bringing in the LGBT portion of this is just one more way that we can move it forward to build that Star Trek life. So I think that with the confluence of science, sci-fi, and the LGBT world, we could build the kind of vision that Roddenberry had. And that's our goal.
Yeah, and I can, I'm sure no one here would guess this, but I could pretty much talk forever. So,
well, I want to leave room
Anara,
for questions. Yeah.
Yes. Questions now, or do you want me to keep?
Let's do questions. Yeah. I would love to do questions if that's okay, Lee. Yeah.
Hey, so I'll start, and then of course you can continue to talk forever when you pick the right question. So this reminds me, just Gina Davis did a lot of work over the last 2 decades to increase the representation of women in girls on television and in movies, even though research showed that most people preferred to just see boys and men in those roles, right? So going counter to the research to drive change sort of from the grassroots, counter, and then retraining the audience to follow that and change their tastes. Do you have you talked with Gina? Have you followed her work and thought about the parallels there, and just learn anything from that?
That's I have interviewed her before, and I thought that the TV series that she did, Commander in Chief, was brilliant and deserved to be on much longer than it was. I think it was on 2 seasons, if I remember right. But the idea behind the show, the execution was brilliant. Now, was it a victim of its time in the sense that there weren't enough people who were jazzed about the idea of seeing a female president? Maybe, but we still had to see it. That show was so essential, whether or not it was there for a season, 2 seasons, an episode. The fact that someone of her caliber in Hollywood got that show made paved the way for Madam Secretary and Téa Leoni and to be able to do it for many more seasons. And we actually, it's interesting. We had a conversation the other day about one of the recent episodes of The Walking Dead, where at the end of the episode, the executive producer does a little recap and points out that the opening sequence is this big fight, this big battle with the zombies. But every single person in the group who's actually fighting the zombies are the women of the group. And the men are like on the top because they have to pull them up. And it was amazing to me that I didn't notice that. 20 years as a critic, and I should have noticed that, but it's becoming just like, well, of course you had Maggie and Carol, and of course you had them on the front lines. They're the best fighters. It didn't occur to me that they were all women. Now, if that isn't proof that every step that led, beginning with Nichelle Nichols as an officer on the bridge of the Enterprise, all the way through to this point that we're at now, where it's finally, for a lot of us, a non-issue. We don't even see it anymore. I think that's the power of media. And even at times when you might think, oh, that was disappointing, I wish it had lasted longer, or could have, the impact is there. And the imprint that it makes on our culture and our society is indelible. It can never be erased. So I have no idea if that answered your question, but I loved that question.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, so, initially this was sort of something that grew organically and you just made it happen. Do you have any department or people working on the statistics behind this? So both on the entertainment side, what is the representation of gays in science fiction or LGBTQIA plus? And then also in the space industry, Inara, do we have data on those two, and are they balanced, or is one farther ahead of the other, and what's going on there?
I haven't seen any of that data on the science side. There could be, actually. Maybe that's something we could launch as a project.
Yeah, we could. I definitely don't have it in, like a spreadsheet kind of a way, but I can say that anecdotally, just watching the news shows that are coming out, Star Trek Discovery. Star Trek Discovery was the first Trek to have brand new openly gay characters. In the movie, they made Sulu's character gay, which people were like, fine. It's like, we'll take whatever you're going to give us. Thank you. Thank you. But when they created the new show, they said, there's no way we're not going to have a gay character. Well, that was season 1. By season 3, we have a transgender character, we have a non-binary character, played by non-binary actors and trans. So from 1 to 3, it has just skyrocketed how much and how expansive the representation is becoming. And if you look at other sci-fi shows like The Expanse is an incredible show. That show from day one, gay characters, trans characters, it was just a part of the fabric. So I would have to sit down and really kind of count it out, but it is absolutely growing. And it seemed, I'm going to knock on wood as I say this, doesn't seem to be slowing down, because obviously we love it. We finally feel validated and seen, and the audiences are responding to it in a way that is kind of like, wait, you guys are interesting? Hang on, you have a different perspective? What's going on there? And, people are engaging with it. The biggest thing about Discovery in the media throughout were the gay relationships. So I see it just increasing and continuing to increase. You can't put the genie back in the bottle, and we're happy to be out of that bottle. So
I think it's nice to see how popular the series is. That says a lot about the progression of society, but we still are ruffling a lot of feathers. There's still a lot of complaints about the gays are taking over our Trek, and I think it's funny when I hear that. I'm like, are you watching the same show I've been watching? You watched the progression over the last 50 years? Because like Gene Roddenberry was one of ours, he may not have been gay, but he was gay. He was all about it. He was all about diversity. He was always about pushing the envelope. And I think he said something along the lines of Star Trek was meant to be, social blueprint disguised as entertainment. And that's definitely how I see it. I just want to see a transgender person in space. So if anyone in this call wants to make that happen, I'm definitely there for it.
Yeah, I'm guessing that for decades there were actors in the community who were, playing people who weren't, and so it's not as though it's unnatural to have that representation on screen as well.
And it's also interesting. I just want to point out really quickly that Nichelle Nichols, after doing Star Trek, she created the program at NASA for women, the focus on African American and women to be to help them with getting into NASA, breaking through. I mean, you're talking about, the 70s and the 80s. And, she launched this nationwide campaign that was incredibly successful. So Mae Jemison, owes her career at NASA to the fact that Nichelle was there as an inspiration, and then also as someone who said, hey, we're going to make the future I was pretending about a reality. Come on, let's do this. And so that connection between science fiction and science and smaller communities, minority groups, has actually happened before and has happened to great success and effect. So if we're able to even, come close to achieving something like that, it's like,
do you know the story? Like, you talked a little bit about the history of the other things. Do you know the story of how they decided to check the box with Sulu?
I'm sorry, how they decided to
check the box by by making the character Sulu gay?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So lots of theories, and I have one too. Many people seem to share this theory, and that is that when they were doing the movie, there was a lot of conversation about why Star Trek, in comparison to other science fiction shows, was so behind the times socially, because that's what Trek is known for. So it was like, what do you got against the gays? Come on. So they kind of had to include us in there somewhere. And my theory is that the execs at the top said, fine, give him a gay. What? Takei. He played Sulu, right? He's super queer. Everybody knows that. Just make Sulu gay with the other actor playing. We'll put all our gay eggs in one basket, and maybe they'll leave us alone and stop talking about it. So in the movie, it is maybe 3 seconds of physical contact that lets us know that they are husbands, not just pals. So they gave us that. And then when Discovery came around, and you got these really smart, creative people to create compelling characters and storylines, they were blown away by how well received the gays actually were,
Yeah.
and how beneficial to their bottom line that was.
That's great. Inara, can you talk just a little bit about how you're bringing Galaxis aerospace expertise and then the role of your radio show in talking about these topics?
Absolutely. So we're on iRock Radio, which is a channel on iHeartRadio. And the show is The Culture of Space. So Cosmic Waves is myself and Space Case Sarah. We're talking about current events in the news, but we're also trying to break down, what the meaning of these events are and, how they can relate to the public. So we're both very much on the feminist side of things, and we want to move the needle forward, as I said. So our slant on space is to, raise up those things which are moving us forward and try to shine a light on the things that still need to change. So I'm really proud of the work that we do there. As far as what I'm doing with Gays in Space in the science world, I really just want everyone to play together. If I can help Dan's organization get sponsorships, nonprofits, they rely on charitable giving, on people jumping on board. So if I can help bring sponsors that can help them, pay for their events, pay for merchandise at the events, help get them, without spending out of their own pockets, get them to the events, that helps them. But then also they're elevating the sciences. People come to these conventions dreaming of a future that we're trying to create. And a friend of mine, Chris Kent, calls it reverse engineering the future. We can see where we want to get to. So what are the steps to get there? When you come to a sci-fi convention, people are so obsessed with the idea of living in this amazing future that Roddenberry envisioned. They will, work for months and sometimes a year to build their costumes and to have prosthetics, and they'll spend their rent money crossing the country to get to one of these conventions to sit with a fan or a star for 30 seconds and say, you changed my life, or you've impacted me. So in that moment, why aren't we there? Why aren't we part of that conversation every single time? What I want to say to them is, you came here to dream about the future of Starfleet and the Federation and a unified humanity. I'm with you on that. Here's how we can build that in reality. So let's enjoy our show, but after it goes off, let's get to work and let's support these space organizations. And also let's give input. Let's ask them, instead of saying, space is so hard and I really don't understand it. Let's ask the space organizations, hey, while you're building rockets, could you please build the future that the rest of us really want to see? So, that's my goal, is to get everyone playing together and we elevate each other.
And there's also, if I could just say very quickly, there was a Deep Space Nine documentary that came out a few years ago. The producers of that documentary, they interviewed me and included me in it because the fact that they didn't represent our community really bothered them. It troubled them. They just couldn't get it past the executives. So, and I was thrilled to be a part of that. The documentary was so well received that their next one is a documentary about Voyager, the next Star Trek series. And it's the same guys working on it. And they said, hey, Dan, how about you come back and give, the gay perspective again? And I said, I actually have a better idea. This is Inara. You need to interview Inara and take the conversation to that next level. So when the Voyager to the Journey documentary comes out, don't be surprised if you see Inara there talking about all of the things that we're talking about here, because they so see the value in that connection between science fiction and science that, they're putting us in movies about it. So I think that's a good sign. And
this is our legacy. Star Trek is absolutely the shared legacy of this community as well. So it's time for us to claim that legacy and to elevate it and to bring the public on board.
Amazing. As we close out, Dan, why don't you tell us, for those who want to get more involved, what to do?
Please we are on all of the social medias, the Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and yes, I did say the Twitter and the Facebook. Our handle is the same across. It's at Gays in Space. 3 A's in gays, 3 A's in space. If you leave out an A, I don't know where you're going to end up, but it's not us. So 3 A's and 3 A's. You can also visit our website, which is Gays in Space, 3A's3A's.org. And if, we we benefit so much from the interaction that we have with people, both virtually and in person. So even people, if you just want to reach out and say hi, send us a quick IM and let us know that, hey, we like what you're doing. I mean, that's the stuff that keeps us going and keeps us energized. We're also working on pulling together footage of people's stories, testimonials that we may turn into our own documentary at some point about, what they think of Gaze in Space or their love of Trek or how Gaze in Space has affected their lives. If you've been to one of our things and you want to be in that, please let us know. We are always so excited to talk to anybody who is on board with what we're doing and wants to help us make that Roddenberry future happen.
And I think we have to do it, Dan. Lee and Dan, we have to do the Gaze in Space thing together. We can't miss this opportunity. All right, 1, 2, 3.
Gaze in Space!
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that was really fun. And make sure that you all look through the chat before you go. That was there's some fun conversation going in the chat as well. So next we're going to have Tim Chrisman give another review, but we have the results of the business plan competition from last month, and we wanted to highlight that. We have a little video of the check presentation. Our winners are in Australia, and so due to time zones, they couldn't be here live to open the enormous check, but we do have a video of that to share. So Tom, I'm going to hand the screen over to you, and then you just let Leo know when you want him to hit play on that video.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to be very quick. I'm only here a few minutes too, because I'm at Satellite 2021 today for the rest of the day. So
Yeah.
I'm glad I could just stop in here for a few minutes and just help out with this a little bit. And I got a little announcement afterward too. I thought we had last month, we had a really nice session. I think Tim agrees. We had some really great teams. I think all the teams were really good and very deserving, but one team slightly had the edge. It's called Esper Satellite Imagery out of Australia. And it's run by someone whose name I'm still working on pronouncing. Shoaib Iqbal is his name. He's from Saudi originally, I guess, but he's in Australia. And they won the $5,000 prize courtesy of Foundation for the Future. Thank you again, Tim, for sponsoring these great events. So Leo, if you want to play that tape, now's the time.
Okay. Hey everyone, my name is Shoaib. I'm the CEO at Esper Satellites. We're a company that's building a network of small satellites that will be capturing hyperspectral imagery of the Earth, and we were the winners of last quarter's new space business plan competition organized by F4F and CSCF. We're really excited to be the winners, to be granted such an honor. We're really grateful to our mentors who actually helped us achieve that. The mentorship just leading up to the pitch itself was a really great validation for not just for our preparation for the pitch itself, but for the entire trajectory our business is on and the trajectory we're going and how we're actually trying to build our business. And it was great validation to be one of the winners and to be bestowed with such an honor. So our check, the big check, has just arrived, and I'm really looking forward to just unboxing it and seeing what it's all about. So give me a second. It's all right here. I'm just gonna quickly take it out of its packaging. And let's turn it the right way around. And there it is. I know exactly where it's going to go in our office as well. I'm really grateful to be bestowed with our company to be bestowed with such an honor. And there's a lot of great stuff that we're working on, and I'm really looking forward to the great stuff companies in future new space business plan competitions will be working on as well. This is a really big win for us, and we're really grateful for this. And thanks a lot to F4F, and thanks a lot to CSCF for this opportunity. Thank you.
That is absolutely great. Those guys were thrilled to work with, and I was really happy to be actually one of the coaches for that team, and it was really thrilling to be able to see how well they did. Just a couple of quick things before I got to run. But we will be doing another one of these. Tim and I just talked about this today. We had a great breakfast meeting this morning. So we are doing another, we will be announcing another all virtual New Space Business Plan competition with Foundation for the Future. Now that announcement is probably going to be happening, since I'm still on the road, probably won't not before Monday, but we definitely have nailed down a date of November the 10th to have that, and I will be announcing the signups will be open very soon. But also, I just wanted to, and also for this audience too, and for anybody in the entrepreneurial sector who might be watching, you're going to get a twofer next week. We are also officially announcing our first live action New Space Business Plan competition in for like almost 2 years. And we're going to be doing it in Dubai as part of the International Astronautical Congress. So that's really happening, and we've got some funding for that and some prizes for that, and we'll be making all sorts of little announcements along those lines as it goes. But when we set up our sign-up sheet on the Center for Space Commerce and Finance website, cscf.space, when that's set up, probably in the next few days, you're going to see an opportunity for those who sign up. You're going to see an opportunity. You can sign up for it. You can sign up and apply for the November event, or you can also, if you're thinking of going to IAC, sign up and apply for the Dubai event as well. So you can have one or the other or both. It's all in one easy, unique form that you can fill out. And we're really looking forward to making that formal announcement first of next week.
Great. Thank you so much. That video was terrific. I love the neon background and so inspirational to see the gratitude of the winners and how far they've come through your mentorship. So thank you again for having the competition, and we're excited to see the one in November.
Okay, you're very welcome. I'm looking forward to it too.
Enjoy satellite.
Okay, back to it. Thanks, guys.
All right, Tim, take it away, and I'll come back on in just a little bit.
Sounds good, Nate. Yeah, so if any of you missed me this morning when I was talking to Representative Banky, I'm Tim Chrisman, Executive Director of the Foundation for the Future. And a lot of times in these time slots, I will talk about one or another of our initiatives. But too often I don't talk about sort of who we are, what we're doing. And so I wanted to take a chance to do that and go through sort of a little bit about us. A lot of you on this call, I've talked to personally, interacted with, and so there may not be much new here, but as anybody working with us knows, it's a lot of times a struggle to stay current on what is going on because it's moving pretty fast. So I wanted to start by just outlining sort of why we exist and the any good explanation of an organization starts with their sort of vision and mission statement. And I'm not going to read the mission to you there. I'm going to assume everybody knows how to read. But the short version of this is, ultimately we want to unleash first America and then humanity's potential, and do that through these basic infrastructure projects. We're not going to be the ones, swinging hammers or actually doing any of the financial derivative development. But what we can do is push those federal leaders, those state leaders, industry, academia, and the public to realize that ultimately there's nothing new under the sun. What we do here on the ground is what we need for space. And there'll likely be some tweaks based on physics and time, but ultimately, a lot of it, we need that support structure. And so that is what we are looking to advocate for, design, and really strive to achieve. And that's, driven in no small part by this sense that, many of you on this call and watching later have, that we are in this exponential growth curve in the space economy that was last seen in the .com era. We just watched an interview with Greg Autry in I think it was CNBC. Don't quote me on that. It's okay, I'm not on the record. But talking about how the space sector is a bubble. And, he was asked this, it was meant to be one of those, shouldn't we not invest in space? It's a bubble, like we need to rein this in. And he said, no, it's absolutely a bubble. Like there is such hype and excitement. Not everything can survive. But he said, I would give anything to have invested in Microsoft, Amazon during the .com bubble. He said, because sure, there was a lot of failures, but we have all been better off because of that growth, that shaking out of what didn't work, what did. And ultimately now it's just a ubiquitous background and we don't even think about it. And I thought that was such a good way of looking at this, because as we project forward 20 years, the .com bust is 20 years behind us. As we look forward, we quickly recognize a lot of the mistakes that were made then exist now for the space sector. There's no coherent sense of what is needed for the basic infrastructure development. Those everything ranging from ports to how you navigate in space to the design of industrial parks and communities that can live around them. And there's no plan to sustain the current levels of growth. It might be, as Greg was talking, overheated and in need of cooling down. But ultimately, this is a new frontier that's being opened. And so it is going to continue growing at a significantly higher rate than more mature sectors. And so what are those things that need to be established, ranging from debt financing to blue collar workforce development, that are going to ensure that we don't run out of steam, for lack of a better term? And that's, in no small part driven by a sense that space is this big, wild, crazy, sexy place where if you win an Olympic gold medal, then you can try out to be an astronaut and maybe you'll be selected. And that there is, essentially a billionaire hurdle in order to get in the investing game for space. Many of us know that's not true, but that is the perception. And we, at some point, lose the vast majority of kids who probably before 10 assume, well, of course, I have heard about people going to space. Of course, I can go to space. And when they leave high school and are entering the workforce, something happens there where we essentially tell them, yeah, and when you get a unicorn, then you can take that to space with you. And we lose them by creating this artificial boundary, or at least letting that boundary persist when it no longer needs to. And so, as you can, tell, this is not a problem that we can solve. None of these are things that we alone can tackle, but we're trying to move the needle and advance, even if it's just a fractional degree. And we're doing that through this concept of bringing together the best that America has. A lot of talk goes through political circles right now. We see it in the public press. And, I saw it in my old life doing work for different government agencies, a sense that China is going to win, that it's inevitable that they're going to beat us, that we need to outcompete them. And in many ways, the sentiment that is expressed is we need to do what they're doing, just more of it or better of it. And that's not how we work. That's not how America beat the Soviet Union during the Cold War. It's not how we have outcompeted every economic competitor since the early 1900s. Instead, we lean on what works, double down on those unique pieces, and force our competitors onto our playing field. We can't top over 1 billion workers, but we have the most robust capital market anywhere in the world and some of the most productive workers anywhere in the world. And so what we're looking to do here at the foundation is bring those two together, easing access to capital and creating the workforce that can actually deploy that capital in those trades and professional schools that right now are not really talked about when you talk space education. They don't do STEM. They may do art. They may do welding, but ultimately they have no sense that they can play. And, you know, I put this quote in here. I've been told that any presentation over 3 or 4 slides, you need a slide in here with a cool quote, ideally from a famous person to lend yourself credibility, break things up. Didn't put who said this because I'm going to be honest, I do not know. But I am sure they are very important, very smart, and definitely agree with us. And that's why it's in here. The sentiment, though, is true. It's not those big one-off projects that create long-term success. You know, we as humans have a tendency to see that, but it is those habits, those things that we do day in and day out that create success, not that one time that you didn't eat the entire birthday cake on your birthday. How we work here at the foundation, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We are currently a mix of member-supported and self-funded nonprofit. And what we bring to the table in terms of our tools, and I'll go into more about our current initiatives, is we have the capability to do in-house economic analysis and workforce development research. Earlier this summer, we published a national economic analysis of one of the signature pieces of legislation we're pushing right now, the Space Corporation Act, looking at the impact of that nationwide, and then drilling into each state and looking at those states' economies and how this would impact it. And we're able to show, you know, multiple millions of jobs, well north of 150 billion in new economic activity from this single policy. And so now we're working with communities at the local level and at the state level in some cases to replicate more detailed versions of that, give them policy options on how they can deploy what tools they have to incentivize and encourage the growth of the space economy in their area. We do events like this. This is a monthly conference. We also have a monthly congressional education webinar. We do ad hoc educational events as needed. And these are all around the idea that we need to be that bridge between, you know, the nerds and the public to unlock what is being said in the academic and the professional circles where the smart people are pushing the envelope and being the thought leaders, and the general public, who in many cases may be scared or turned off by the technical jargon or details because it feels like it's not real or it's not for them. And so that is what these event series are meant to address. And then we're trying to ensure that we build a network of connected organizations ranging from nonprofits to schools to companies to make sure that space, as I talked with Representative Benke earlier, space remains cooperative, that it doesn't become this siloed competition area where nonprofits are competing over funding and companies are competing for orbits and schools are competing for students. But instead, we recognize that we're at the point where there may be some competition, but we gain far more by working together, playing to each other's strengths. And, it ultimately in 20, 30, 40 years, when we have a system where there's the Uber and Lyft of space competing, that's a pretty good problem to have at that point. But for now, keeping it as collaborative as possible and incentivizing those network effects is one of our key goals. But ultimately, what makes us different? There are a lot of space nonprofits ranging from the big, like Space Foundation, National Space Society, all the way down through new and smaller organizations, kind of like Gaze in Space that we just heard from, that are serving specific populations and may not be as well known outside of things like their circle. And really what makes us different is that we're based just outside DC, and we are advocating to Congress for new financial tools, for new workforce development. That is our differentiator. I told a number of people during the lead up to the creation of the foundation that, look, I'm a former CIA officer. I spent well over a decade in Army intelligence, and I have no problem interacting with Congress in pushing the envelope and telling them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And that is what differentiates us. A lot of larger organizations and more niche focused ones don't have the same risk appetite that we do in terms of advocating while being a nonprofit. And no doubt there is paperwork required to ensure compliance with IRS regulations. But ultimately, that is our niche, is we're going to do that paperwork, and then we're going to take the risks on behalf of the entire industry and people like you. And so, as we're going about doing this work, we've binned the programs we have into three fairly large categories. And we're right now in that public education category, where we're talking about the future of sustainability and recycling and garbage in space. And that's this conversations series. We have another one that sort of bridges between public education and capital formation, and that's our congressional education webinar, Infrastructure for the Future. In case you couldn't tell, once we settled on a brand, we went all in on this and just stamped it out like a machine here. So thank you, Leo, for basically designing our entire portfolio of logos based off our original. But then we also on the public education side, we're launching a podcast where I'll be interviewing people that are doing the hard things. I recently wrote an article about we need to stop pretending space is hard, because when we do, we essentially tell people it's not for you. And this podcast is meant to talk about that openly, that yes, space is challenging, it's difficult, but it's a challenge worth doing. As Kennedy said, we don't go to the moon because it's easy, we go because it's hard. And that is enough of a reason. And so talking about it like that, as opposed to talking about it like it's this bar that needs to be overcome. And so that's what the Podcast for the Future is looking to do, in interviewing a lot of thought leaders. We also have an annual awards ceremony. The first one's coming up here in October, October 21st. If you're in the DC area, you can, by all means, register to come. We're going to have a handful of speakers from Defense Innovation Unit, MGM Works. we're going to honor a couple of congresswomen who have really taken the lead on workforce development and capital formation for space. And we're looking to make this an ongoing event as we go forward. We're also going to take this model and use it in upcoming events that we have planned. You'll hear about some of these soon, but one of them is going to be in Miami. So if you're in Miami in December, let me know. We're going to have another gala type event there during Art Basel. The second bucket, as I talked about in the capital formation one, we just launched a trade association for space finance firms. Turns out that didn't exist until now. And we did that with the intent that this is a sector that needs representation more than ever. As it grows, we need to ensure that the collaborative nature that exists right now in that community is able to persist, and that we're able to continue to realize the benefits of a lot of these firms and funds working together to ensure the success of the companies they're investing in. Sort of bridging that capital formation in our last bucket, the workforce development, we have the Space Corporation Act that I mentioned earlier, which would create an infrastructure development corporation for space. It would be capable of issuing bonds and loan guarantees, unlocking debt financing, and ultimately jump-starting a lot of the investment that is done on the ground for these hard infrastructure projects, but unlock them in space by creating a risk management mechanism for large private equity firms. Also related to it is the Good Jobs Challenge that we're building a national team for, that'll create a basically a pilot program for our workforce development, but do that through some of these COVID-related relief bills where we look to help communities build back, to revitalize and expand their workforce and what is in the realm of possible for them. And we would do that under the auspices of our Workforce for the Future program, which seeks to replicate the NASA Space Grant Consortium at the blue collar and trades level, where ultimately it would seek to cross-level training and certifications nationwide, administer block grants similar to what the Space Grant Consortium does, and enable that future where community and technical colleges across the country have the ability to certify space welders and space technicians. Running short on time, but this is the team, and I'll keep going here to, how can you get involved? This is, usually how we close any of our meetings. And what I tell people first and foremost is we need your ideas. We need your name. We need your ideas. We need your thoughts more than we need your money. And we need your money. But having those formal partnerships with industry, academia, and nonprofits is vital to ensuring that not only are we not duplicating work, but also working in such a way that ensures the success of all and not just at the expense of others. Second, we need constituents who are willing to reach out to their congresspeople. And if you're willing to be one of those Pathfinder advocates, our government relations team can help you craft those letters, help send them, and help do follow-ups. Lee saw earlier this summer that constituent offices at different congressional offices move fast when they get a notice from their constituent. We had meetings set up within a week of her sending a note. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, we are a nonprofit, and ultimately we rely on donations from people like you. And so we need to broaden the financial base. And so if you are capable, if you know people who are, by all means, reach out, and we would love to talk more about that. So I will leave it there, Lee.
Thank you, Tim. Great stuff, great refresher and some updates on materials, new ways of saying things, great structure. But you say crazy sexy place like that's a bad thing. All right. Next, we are going to do a really neat combination of segments. And we're kind of moving on from our core topic today. Kind of finished out our series on space garbage recycling and sustainability. And we're going to do a neat student spotlight, extended student spotlight. First, we'll have Madhu Thangavelu give a talk on lunar habitats, followed by the extended student spotlight led by David Charant with student teams who have worked on similar habitats, as well as some of the leaders and teachers involved in creating those programs. Then one of the judges for those student competitions, Megan Crawford, will do a Space Money segment talking about the judging. So it'll be a really nice combination of speakers and segments that flow nicely together. So to kick us off, Madhu Thangavelu conducts the ASTE 527 Graduate Space Exploration Architecture Concept Synthesis Studio in the Department of Astronautical Engineering within the Viterbi School of Engineering at the University of Southern California. I'm sure your business card looks a little bit like that big check that we just presented. He also teaches the ARC 599 Extreme Environment Habitation Design Seminar in the School of Architecture, where he is a graduate thesis advisor. He is co-author of the book The Moon, Resources, Future Development, and Colonization. He is also the invited author of the chapter Living on the Moon in the Encyclopedia of Aerospace Engineering, a major reference work published by John Wiley & Sons. He is a member of the team that won the coveted NASA NIAC Phase 1 and 2 awards consecutively for developing robotic building technologies on the Moon and Mars. Mr. Thangavelu is also on the faculty of International Space University. Madhu, I'm so glad we could have you on. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Lee, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Oh, great. Let me go to my presentation here. How does that look, Lee?
That looks great.
Okay, and thank you for that kind introduction, Lee. The only change I would make is that I want to be talking about what we could do right now, as opposed to later on, habitats on the moon and so on. This is the focus of our or rather the theme of the topic this semester. I have an oversubscribed class, and we are all about thinking about the moon. I'll talk a little bit about the astronautical engineering program at USC, which is different from the aerospace engineering curriculum, what I do in the School of Architecture, and something about what is happening now, and what's about to happen around the moon, something about the future of the moon, and a summary. The most important thing I want to let everybody know is something that a lot of us already know, but we don't apply as much. And that is about why we do the things we do. Once we get that nailed properly, you can have the what and the how following, which is what most of us in the engineering community do. We do the how and the what. And but the why is the most important thing. And Simon makes a living out of this, and corporations know this, large organizations know this. So throughout my slides, you want to be thinking why you're doing what you're doing. If you ask the people who've been pushing the why, these are some of the few that you can think about right now. Elon Musk wants to settle other planets, particularly for human survival insurance. Jeff Bezos thinks we have to protect the unique blue marble that we call planet Earth. John Marburger thinks we should use all of the solar system to improve our economic sphere of influence. Joseph Campbell, whom we all know from the Star Wars mentor for George Lucas, he wants us to go out into space, come back, and tell stories to inspire people. That is a very powerful part of the human experience. Freeman Dyson, who used to be quite interesting and have very creative mind, said, we've been looking out into the skies for so long, we don't see anything. No flying craft, no green aliens. Our job perhaps is to go out there and beautify the solar system and the universe. Something to think about. And Frank White, I don't know if Lee has talked to all of you, has been promoting the idea that once you go out, look back into planet Earth, you come back changed forever because you realize how finite the world is, how there are no us versus them on planet Earth. And finally, there is a new movement on which says we should preserve these beautiful things that we put out. We work on them for 20 years, 30 years, and then we fly them out. And guess what? It's the last we see of them. But now there is a concerted effort in the government too to preserve the artifacts of human heritage values. And we think we want to do this on the moon first. And that is by Michelle Hanlon, who is the president of the National Space Society. So USC and the moon go a long way back. To be very clear, we go to the time when Neil Armstrong was a graduate student at USC when he was asked to fly to the moon. That was his assignment. Buzz Aldrin, the pilot on that craft, is a friend of the studio. He comes around to our finals sometimes. I want you all to go visit AST 527 to see what we've done in the past. There are a lot of things about human space flight and about the moon. This is Neil Armstrong's thesis that he presented soon after he came back. He graduated from USC and went on to present his thesis at the Johnson Space Center. And this is my favorite spacesuit. Now, we'll talk about spacesuits later, but spacesuits are pretty things. They're beautiful things. They're heroic things. We have to design them appropriately. Here you see Neil Armstrong posing in his Gemini G2 suit, which I think is the most spectacular. I mean, it changed the perception of spaceflight and astronauts around the globe. And so Neil Armstrong is a larger than bigger figure. We have him in our school. We visit him often when I have a class. Sometimes we bring them over and have a good time. The astronautical engineering program is very special. Don't think aerospace engineering. It is different. Look at the curriculum. Astronautical engineering deals with going outside the atmosphere and dealing with stuff. It's very different from the curriculum offered in aerospace engineering. USC has a first-class program in which my course is nested. It's a 3-unit class. It focuses on one thing only, imagination and creativity. I think Tim mentioned a little bit about this. This is where we put all our focus into. Get our students to think creatively and imaginatively. And I expect them to be visual about it because everything we do in space is visual in one respect or the other. Go on our site, which has been running around for a long time. Some of those projects are listed here, and you want to look at everything, in particular, my favorite, Planet Moon, which is what I want to talk about. These are our class, every finals. We get a large number of audience. Our class is small, but usually our reviewers are many more than our students. And as you can see, we have very special guests. So in the fall, like now, I teach in the engineering department. In the spring, however, I have to deal with civil architects. And architects are a very special group of people. They don't go by numbers and charts and plots and PowerPoints. They want to know what space can do for us now. What can it do for the 7.5 billion people? Not the 200 or 500,000 people who are employed in the aerospace industry, but now they are interested in how to feed, how to shelter, how to support the economies of the world. Very different group of people. But you know what? They are like this. We think space technologies, human space flight can go with what we are doing in the ground on planet Earth today. So you probably heard the term sustainability professed by the agency, by the industry, and so on and so forth. But what does that really mean? What does it really, really mean? Again, something to think about after this lecture. To the government agency, it means you have a chunk of money that's given to them every year, and you find ways to distribute and disperse it among the various projects that are ongoing. It's very different from sustainable in the real term of the word in commerce. It means that you have to have an idea, promote it, and do something that you can continue to do without outside help. Without outside help. And it's a very simple formula. It says profit equal to revenue minus cost. Again, Tim so told it in the last bullet. Everything requires funds to support. The question is, how do you make it sustainable and self-sustainable? So all of you need to think about this. Profit equal to revenue minus cost. Now, human space flight, we talk a lot about things in the far term, but going to Mars. So there's a conference coming up very soon about going to Mars. You come to an engineering school at USC, and the first lectures will tell you where we really stand in any of these matters. It's wonderful to have vision. I do that in our class too. But we also need to do engineering to know what our merits, what our limitations are, and how we need to conquer them over time. So things like ISRU, fuel manufacture, extraterrestrial agriculture, Mars expeditions, so on, are for later. I'm going to talk about what we can do now, right now. It seems we call it near term. It could have space tourism, orbital tourism, orbital debris mitigation, and some interesting areas of communication are being done right now or can be done in the near future. Over time, you can evolve it towards more and more ambitious programs, including Mars missions. Now, why is commerce and commercial activities important? Because if you look at the history of it, you'll see that once you engage the world in commerce, wars and war mentalities recede. We want to make wars obsolete. Everybody does. Russians do, the Chinese do, we do too. Sanctions are things that we think makes people change their minds. But you know what? All it does is make the poor people suffer, while the governments and the leadership don't at all. So something else we need to be thinking about how to make this happen. Commerce, space commerce is one way to do this. It's global in scope. So some of the lunar orbital tourism ideas that are happening now, as you know, or about to happen, is Dear Moon. And I'm going to talk about a starting block that will avoid some of the thorns that are being discussed right now. I call it the look, mom, no touch approach. So I must admit that over time, we all want to be doing magical things on the moon and so on. But an idea came about called modular assembly in low Earth orbit way back. And it is in our book. The second edition is out there for everybody to buy. It is also the class book, which Buzz Aldrin is wrote the foreword for it. And it's a very simple idea. You go into low Earth orbit, build whatever you want to build, like the International Space Station, and you fly it out further into space, into GEO, and off onto the moon, around the orbit of the moon. And that was my work from USC some years ago. That's what a habitat would look like when it's built on the moon and flown to the moon. And, some of us, architects, are not happy with PowerPoint charts and graphs and plots. We build these things to model, to scale. So this is my rendition of a lunar habitat that was built in low Earth orbit and flown directly to the moon. Avoids a lot of complications like equipment and other things. That's what it would look like upon getting ready to land on the moon. Now, some years ago, I brought this up to family and they said, you know what, this ain't going to fly because you depend on NASA. Budgets are terrible. And most importantly, schedules are usually very long. How to make it happen quickly? You got to get companies involved. You got to get commerce involved. And so this was our rendition for that. Now, low Earth orbit is where the action is right now. I think all of you need to know this, and you know this already. Space station up there, a huge number of constellations are going up to integrate communications infrastructure globally and for space purposes. And we know how to put large things together in space. At least some of us do. Now, companies right down here from a few miles down the road, they are able to service the International Space Station. And some of the technologies are proprietary that not even the agencies of the world have access to. That is how commerce proceeds. Agility, ingenuity, creativity. So here you see our favorite Crew Dragon spaceship coming out and building the Malio spacecraft. We can build hotels in orbit, and we can then think about going outwards to the moon. We would follow the exact same trajectory that was done for us by NASA over 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we've sent people to the moon and around, and now small companies are able to do that. This is exactly the design that the Dear Moon projects wants to do, and it follows very similar to the Apollo profile. In our own studio, we said we don't even have to wait for that. We have the equipment, the spacecraft already designed that we can use to fly to the moon. Here you see an inflatable habitat comparable to what Bob Bigelow in Vegas has been testing, and in orbit. Some of those prototypes are in orbit and even on station. We think we can develop a much larger, not only, it's already there, we could fly them an inflatable habitat with people in it around the moon. Of course, we have to be very careful in this mission because once you exit the blanket, the magnetosphere blanket of the Earth, we are at the mercy of the sun. And it is possible, particularly during this period as the solar maximum is coming about, we are starting to see more sunspots in the sun, which means that the sun is starting to be more active. We should be careful how we do this. And for that, a notional diagram is already there. We can have beautiful storm shelters installed inside of these vehicles that allow us to stay safe during these periods. Now, what is the most exciting thing about leaving Earth and going out? It's very clear the overview effect is magical. People spend hours in the cupola of the space station looking out and taking pictures. Every single second of their spare time, they want to cram into the most visible and outwardly looking object on station, which is the cupola. This is how it looks like. It gets better as we move further out. We get a synoptic view of Earth that we cannot get when you're looking from station. And the whole Earth appears as a disk. As you move out and further, it becomes very beautiful. Only 24 people on the whole planet has seen this so far, some 50 years ago. Now it's time for thousands and millions of people to see it. The moon is very small compared to the Earth. So you can imagine being at the moon, looking at Earth to see how beautiful, how big it is. As you approach closer to the moon, you'll see a beautiful, spectacular view that Aldrin called magnificent desolation, but it's far more beautiful and very spectacular. These are some of the views, and this is the million-dollar view that people, not astronauts, but people want to witness and come back and tell the story. You'll come back like you would in the Apollo era. And now let me tell you what we do in the future. These things I showed you can happen now. We don't even need any new technologies. We have the rockets, the spacecraft, and all the operations right now to do this. In the future, we would want our passengers to be more comfortable. I think the free fall zero-G gravity fad will go away very quickly when you realize that people can enjoy flight with simulated gravity. And once you do that, everything, it's a paradigm shift, and that can happen later on. There are complications now. They would go from Earth and rendezvous with a lunar orbital resort, spend some time there, and then land on the lunar surface and look around and enjoy some of the landmarks we see from Earth. Can be seen directly on the moon after landing at a site that is close to the landmarks. You'd be able to perhaps walk around and see some things. And then history will step in. You would visit the Apollo landing site and see the footprints of the first humans to set foot on another extraterrestrial body. And even more spectacular, you would have holographic projections of Neil and Buzz stepping out of the real distant craft that is sitting right there before you and stepping on the real first footprints. You'd see over time, you'd enjoy fresh food produced on the moon. You'd be taken to habitats, sheltered habitats underground inside of lava tubes. You'd see robotics constructions happening around the moon, and You would enjoy meeting co-robots, which are already being designed by NASA. And I have my friend, you'll have many friends like this. It's already happening. Humanoid robots are taking over things on planet Earth. And with a bit of luck, you'll get to walk around and enjoy space. There are rovers being built and tested right now. And all our idea is then to make this a spectacular experience for the millions of people who live on planet Earth. One idea that we have promoted in the book is what we call the 345th meridian lunar maglev, which takes you past all the landmarks on the moon, that you can come back, look at the moon, and tell your friends you've been there. A train ride on the moon would look like that. Magnetically levitated trains. They're flying all over the world now, but we're going to do it even more beautifully. This is what I would like for our people to be doing. Science exploration is for a narrow sliver of people. Majority of the human population would like to see and experience things. We expect over time to have a UN headquarters on the moon, because it's the only continent that you can see going around the world every day. The moon looks at you and you look at the moon. You cannot see New York, you cannot see Vienna, but you can see the moon every day. And that should be the summit of the United Nations and the global headquarters of humanity. We think we can put time capsules there and update them. And, the moon does not have an atmosphere. So rocks from space come tumbling down. That's why you see many craters on the moon. We should take care of that using lasers. So we can use high energy lasers to pop them off before they come and cause trouble for you. All of these things we do because, again, it comes back to the thoughts of an interesting man who lived around the time. We were talking about landing on the moon. He produced a book called Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. Buckminster Fuller was a polymath and an architect, and you may know him as the inventor of the geodesy dome. Now, Buckminster Fuller tells you that we are all on a spaceship and we are all astronauts, and the spaceship is called planet Earth. So in summary, space tourism is a commercial endeavor that we can do now. Things are happening already in the suborbital arena. And in November, we'll have an orbital. I have this worry about astronauts being given wings on going suborbital and so on. To be an astronaut, you want to go into orbit at least, stay there for a while, but all that for later. And we are switching over from this idea of space exploration to space utilization. And that's very important to remember. Once you do something over and over, then you start to think how to make it sustainable and self-sustainable. And the way to do that is to go from suborbital to orbital to lunar expeditions. So fundamental to sustainability is commerce. We already know it's happening. And remember the mantra, profit equal to revenue minus cost. NASA has helped us. NASA has been helping us for 50 some years, 60, 70 years. And it's time for us to be thinking creatively, as Tim said too. We need ideas to make it self-sustainable. ISS is already going to be open to space tourists. It'll be followed by space stations, private space stations. and then lunar tourism is coming up. So I think if you can avoid a lot of problems dealing with the current Artemis Accords and so on, which is a very nice thing to do. It'll take time to resolve, but in the meantime, lunar orbital tourism is just waiting in the wing for us. Get the book, read it. Every time something new comes up, I call up my co-authors and say, hey, listen, they're starting to talk about this. It's a wonderful thing. It's all in the book. Take a look at our class, our studio. We have an incredible class going on this fall. And one more time, think about why you are doing the things you're doing. It is possible in this industry, in this agency, to go through the entire cycle of your work without having to think about the why and still retire very comfortably. But I want you all to think about why we do what we do and how we do. Thank you very much. And last of all, if you want to learn a little bit about space architecture and space philosophy, go over here to the AIAA section. We have some YouTube videos. I think it'll be very inspiring for you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lee.
Thank you, Madhu. Full circle on that presentation. Really enjoyed it. And the image of the Coca-Cola canister as part of the habitat.
It makes a lot of people think. Yes, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, now we're moving into our student spotlight. If you've been following the chat at all today and yesterday, you know that David Charant, well, he's done pretty much everything. He is a pilot and mechanical engineer with 40 plus years of multidisciplinary experience in aviation and space, business, and technology. He retired from NASA in 2013 and currently advises startups and mentors for space settlement design competitions.
And David's one of those very rare people who has kept all his hair despite having worked for NASA. Hi, David.
It is quite a head of hair, yes. Oh, let's see. David developed space station maintainability concepts, led U.S. subsystem element and international test verification for ISS, and was technology integration manager for the JSC Advanced Development Office, Exploration Systems Engineering Office. He was vehicle systems lead for next generation launch technology and lead for the pre-constellation lunar lander development planning team. He was also the lead for environments and became assistant chief of staff on the technical side for systems engineering and integration in constellation. David was also the lead for Orion crew and service module safety and mission assurance and the 2011 propellant depot risk analysis that we did a great segment on last month, and as a member of the 2015 Next Gen Space LLC Evolvable Lunar Architecture Study Team. David defined an integrated risk strategy that was key to formulation of a commercial NASA public-private partnership concept to supply propellant from lunar ice for NASA Mars missions. In 2016, David initiated and co-led a study to include multiple lunar resources besides water for a follow-on economic research for space development study for NASA Ames and HQ. That's a mouthful, and thank you for all your service. I think maybe we need to institute a Hall of Fame for the future, and start working on you as an inductee. Oh, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. And
Sounds
we're
good.
working on getting the students unmuted.
Okay,
as you do your
you've
intro.
got the order on Discord and everything. Great. So yeah, in my spare time, I also do a lot of mentoring of students and different kinds of things. And space settlement design competition has been one of the ones I've really loved working with. My good friend Anita Gale has started this quite a long time ago, and I'm going to try switching over. She unfortunately can't be with us today. She's rafting in the Grand Canyon. So I've got a presentation that I'm just going to borrow a little bit of some clips from and try to make sure this works. I'm going to try sharing the screen, and if I'm going to try sharing the sound. And hopefully this works. Just wave to me or something. I can see see in the gallery. If it, well, I won't after I guess this gets started, but we'll see. Let me know if there's any problems.
Looks great.
So history, we've been doing this. I've been doing this since 1984. There were 3 co-founders. My husband was one of the 3. He passed away about 10 years ago. And a guy named Rob Kolstad, who's currently in Colorado Springs. We did it with what we call one-offs. We first did it for National Exploring Conference. This is Explorer Scouts. And we were doing it for a few years at Jet Propulsion Lab. We were asked to do one for the 25th anniversary of Apollo 11. There was a group called Space Week International. We did that in DC. And that started us doing what we call qualifying competition.
We're buffering a little bit on our end.
And it's in their school to get our internet connections went away.
Sorry.
So we site for those qualifying registrations in 1995. We thought it was just going to be in the US. Then we got an international entry. We still do the qualifying format, but now most students who participate do so through the semifinal process. The first of those was in India. We're now doing them all over the place. And we are connected with the National Space Society. So when you see that green oval, like up on the left, it may be anywhere on the page, that actually is a chart that we show to the students, or it's a material that we show to the students in the design competition. So those are unaltered from what the students see. And this shows where teams are coming from to go to the finalist competition at the end of July. That qualifying competition, we get 4 teams from the qualifying competition. We're actually judging that right now for this year. So we will select 4 teams to be finalists from their 40-page written proposals. Everywhere else, they're doing live competitions. Canada, David and I are going to be in Vancouver, BC, in not this coming weekend, the following weekend. And we'll do the very first Canadian semifinal. And the next slide I'm going to show shows changes between 2019 and what we expect in 2020. So kind of look in the bottom right and you'll see some changes. So we currently have 1 semifinal for the UK and the European Union. We're going to split that. So there will be a UK, they actually call it a final. The Brits are different. We will combine Eastern Europe into a European semifinal, and then we'll start a semifinal for the Middle East and Africa. So this is, and also we hope to have finally 4 semifinals in the United States, which is about the capacity that we have for the international competition format. So you can see we are truly global. I don't travel to all of these, but I travel to a lot of them. David travels with me to the Asia semifinal, which is in India.
Okay, as you can tell, this was recorded back in about 2019. I'm going to jump forward. Was everybody able to hear that all right? Could you hear everything?
Yes, that other than that one little moment, it seemed fine.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that was a glitch in the original Zoom presentation, which was made for the NASA Commercial Space Lecture Series, beginning of 2019. So I'm locating the next little segment that I want to let Anita cover here. Let's see. So,
but we're getting feedback that you could speak up a little bit.
Okay, yeah, let me try to do that.
Great.
You.
They get the RFP the day before presentation day. We don't want them to do 2 nights without sleep because they would. Okay, what a competition is, it's 3 different things really. What we prepare is, and yeah, we got to that chart. What we prepare is basically an industry simulation game. We are recreating the experience of being on a proposal team in the space industry. I have been on many of them. Every decision we have made about how to run a competition is based on how real proposal teams work, except now that I'm retired, I don't get to see that so much. In the semifinals, the maximum company size is 50 students. That's still a lot of people. It does mean they need to work in an organization chart environment. And that means that if you're in structural engineering, you don't design houses. That's human engineering. If you're in automation engineering, you don't calculate orbits. That's in operations engineering. Then we have volunteers. So that's what we bring, is this industry simulation. What the students are going to do, or what they think they're doing, is they are designing a space settlement or a space habitat. So they know we're going to put them in the future. They're going to read about future history. They will get a task described in a request for proposal. What it really is, what the effect is, it's an incredibly effective STEM program. And I haven't heard of any STEM program that gets the kind of results we get when we do surveys, which is not often. We do them at JSC. Generally, the positive response to the question, are you more likely to pursue a STEM curriculum and career? It runs 85 to 93%. And I've not heard of any other STEM program that does that. We do steer students into technical careers. Not always engineering, not always space. We have doctors that have come out of this, and biologists and oil industry professionals. But it really wakes people up to the idea that they can pursue a STEM curriculum and career. This is the organization chart that we show them. So a few things about this. The chief executive officer is always a volunteer. Usually we have co-CEOs, 2 or 3. We might have somebody in training, and we do have our volunteers we have participants come back as volunteers. They have such an awesome experience. I know I sound self-complimentary here, but we see this all the time, so it's reality. They have such an awesome experience, they want to pay it forward, so they come back as volunteers, especially in India, because there's not a strong volunteer culture. Our volunteers in India are primarily people who've been through the program before. The president, vice presidents, all those departments, those are all kids. So when we see a room at the start of a competition, there are 4 kids in that room who are going to be company presidents by the end of the night. Vice president of marketing and sales has staff, and that's where the briefing charts go together. So they are very unpopular because they're always asking everyone else to get their designs and their drawings and their data in, and their costs and their schedules. Sometimes a CEO volunteer will ask for a systems engineering department as well to kind of tie everything together. Vice president of engineering has 4 departments reporting to him or her, and it's amazing how often in these the executives, and we don't influence this, the kids pick themselves, the executives turn out to be women oftentimes. Very interesting how often that happens. The 4 engineering departments are crafted so that every department owes data to every other department, and every department is owed data to every other department. And we will actually put requirements into the RFP that forces them to communicate, because just like us grown-ups, they have a tendency to stovepipe. And we even tell them, you'll have a tendency to stovepipe. And they do, and we convince them to communicate. Director of the Human Engineering Department is a key in all of this. We originally, from the very beginning in 1984, we had Human Engineering Department so that even kids without technical ability know what a nice house is. And they can design a house, or they know about community design. So the idea was to bring people into the competition who didn't have technical expertise. You'll see a quote a little bit later on showing a different effect of that department.
Okay, I'm going to jump this forward to just show you one other key part of this, which is what we call the request for proposal, or RFP. And let's see, we should have that. Just a second. It is like a really kind of mini RFP that you would see in real industry.
system for getting water, and every time design a system for getting air, and every time design a system for recycling. So they focus on the uniqueness of each scenario. We do tell them these are real business opportunities in the future. So we introduce the each scenario with a, and I'm going to need to speed this up, with it. We tell them what year they're in, we tell them what scenario they're doing, and then we give them history. So everything in purple here, those were actually scenarios from the mini competitions the prior years. An important containers that actually came. This is again from the program book. So we summarize space infrastructure development in this Gantt chart. So you see things that we're familiar with for the future. And this actually is just a summary of like 12 pages of text describing these different bits of space infrastructure. It would be a very handy thing to have. This is an example. This is actually, you're not intended to read the pages on the right. Notice there's not a lot of blank space on those. It's an actual RFP on the right for the lunar mining scenario that we're doing now. There's a structure to the RFPs. The habitats are always 3 pages. The large scenarios are always 4. The large scenarios also have a section 7 on business development. Always for every RFP, the some paragraphs 1, 2, and 3 are always the same. So overall design is always 2.1. Use of interior space 2.2. Construction is always 2.3 and 3.3 and 5.1. Community design is always 4.1. Houses are always 4.2. Always the 0.4 paragraphs are unique to the particular scenario. So those will change every time we go through a chronology. Those will change, sometimes better, sometimes just to be changed, but they're always unique to this scenario.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. I'd like to have Rick go ahead and talk a little bit about the design tournament and how what the tournament is compared to the competition. Basically, it is an idea to try to make this more scalable and bring it out to more students. So Rick, are you ready to?
I am here. Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm just gonna, let me just see if I can get things set up here to share my screen. There's that. And if all goes well, I can share the screen. It's at screen 3. And there we are. And want to make sure we go, okay. That's there. All right. And it looks like I'm on and we are live. So, well, hello, everyone. It is definitely great to be here. Lee and David, thank you so much for making this possible. And thank you for inviting me to be here. My name is Frederick Janae. I'm an astrophysicist turned entrepreneur and founder and executive director of Expanding Frontiers, the lead institution that, together with Anita Gale and David Chevrant, created and brought the Space Settlement Design Tournament to the students of South Texas and Mexico. Let's see. Well, very good. Just a little background, because there are amazing things that are happening down in South Texas and Brownsville that are associated with this new space revolution. Expanding Frontiers is a nonprofit 501c3 organization with a mission to foster the commercial space ecosystem by providing unique training opportunities for students, veterans, and aspiring entrepreneurs who are interested in both the space and energy sectors. Please see our website, www.expandingfrontiers.org, and follow us on LinkedIn. We are headquartered in Brownsville, Texas. We were founded in 2019 at what we now call New Space City, Brownsville. Our headquarters is located at the historic Pan Am building at the Brownsville International Airport. And when I say historic, the Pan Am building was actually inaugurated by none other than Amelia Earhart and Charles Lindbergh. I also want to give a quick shout out to the city of Brownsville, especially Deputy City Manager Helen Ramirez. Hey, Helen. The Brownsville Community Improvement Corporation, Project Space, the Federal Department of Energy, and the Federal Economic Development Agency, whose help and support make Expanding Frontiers and programs like these possible. So again, sort of giving the context of where the Space Settlement Design Tournament sits, Expanding Frontiers runs several programs designed to get the community excited and involved in the new space industry in this time when private industry is moving into space. From the award-winning Rockets and Rigs initiative to our novel Entrepreneurs in Residence Apprenticeship program, students, veterans, and aspiring entrepreneurs and community members can all find a way to participate in the next chapter of human space exploration and development. Of course, today we're focusing on the Space Settlement Design Tournament and the students that have been participating in this event. It all really started, I guess I'm trying to think back, it's probably around 2015 or so, when Anita Gale and David Servant visited Brownsville, Texas for a Rockets and Rigs event. And they saw the unique space-focused programs that we were developing for high school and college students at the local university, University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. I had already been a professor in the region for about a decade, and we did things like bring the world's largest radio telescope to South Texas. And we also played a major role in bringing one of the most successful launch companies to the region, but those are both other stories. Concerning the tournament, Anita took me aside and said, you have to see the Space Settlement Design competition. Now, anyone that has met Anita knows that she is a force of nature. She is committed to space exploration and development, but most importantly, she is committed to giving opportunities, novel, unique opportunities to students and growing the next generation of space explorers. So with all that energy behind her and of course behind David, I of course had to hear what they had to say. And when they started describing the tournament and what happened here, I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. Even went up to see one of the tournaments and saw that something really unique and inspirational was happening. So I discussed this with a colleague of mine, Alma Miller, and we decided that we had to get this to the students of Brownsville and this region, including Mexico, somehow, some way. Now, keep in mind that the South Texas region is historically an underrepresented region, so opportunities like these are so rare. So we felt that, yes, we had to get our people plugged into this. So after several trips to Houston, various brainstorming sessions and glasses of wine, the Space Settlement Design Tournament was born. It differs in several key ways to the competition. It is not necessarily plugged in directly to the different parts of the competition, like David was showing in Anita's slides. It tends to be a little bit more compact, and they tend to be self-contained. But nonetheless, the full, I believe, the full effect is really there, and it's really giving students in the region opportunity to have this unique experience of this industry stimulation, where they get to think and dream about exploring space. But at the same time, they're learning really important skills about how to organize themselves in a large group setting, how to, as Anita was saying, work within an organization chart, and also how to communicate these results in a way that touches your audience and sells what it is, the ideas and concepts that you're trying to get across. So we had several small-scale prototype events leading up to the first live event in 2018, where Mr. Javier Gonzalez, one of our speakers here today, was a teacher chaperone for the event. He saw firsthand the enormous impact this program has on students and has become an advocate ever since. He's been working closely with us as we bring this one-of-a-kind experience to so many students in the region. So before moving to our next speaker, and to the stars of our show, the high school students that have participated in this event, I just want to mention that our next event, the inaugural International Space Settlement Design Tournament, is going to be held November 11th through the 14th. And please see our website for details. So thanks everyone for allowing me to give some background on the tournament. I really urge everyone somehow, some way to get a glimpse of what's happening. Definitely feel free to contact us, contact myself, contact David, to get yourself one way or another involved in the tournament or even in the competition. It will be a life-changing event. Thank you so much, and back to you, David.
Okay, well, thank you, Rick. The other thing I wanted to cover is we've got a third program that we have just started, which we're calling Space Settlement Entrepreneur Competition. And the idea of this is that you may have noticed there were a number of subcontractors listed in one of the slides that Anita was presenting. She didn't really talk about them, but we decided to try to roll something out to allow college students, once they've graduated, to experience the startup space, the new space kind of environment. And we do that by having a parallel entrepreneur competition where we take small groups of students and we have them get the RFP at the same time that other students do, and we give them the opportunity to meet with another position that we have the main competition students have, which is a subcontracts manager. So we simulate customer interaction and let them see if they can come up with a new subcontractor that can help the big companies meet their RFP proposal requirements. So we can talk about that a little bit more, but we've got students that have been in all three of these different but related competitions. And I want to start off with having Shekinah, who is one of our students who's been with us for most of the recent ones. Shekinah, are you live here?
Yes, I'm unmuted.
Okay, and Rick, can you turn your slides off?
Yes, I can, I think, somehow. Uh-oh. Hello.
Okay, well, go ahead, Shekinah. You don't have a slide, do you?
Stop. There we go.
Okay.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Shekinah Hayworth. I'm from Panora, Iowa, which is a really, really, really small town. I'm currently a freshman at University of Northern Iowa, double majoring in computer science and business administration. So I've competed in 6 space element design competitions, my first 2 being in person in 2019. So I competed in the JSC regional competition and my team won that, and I was selected to go to internationals, where I was vice president of business and marketing, and my team won the competition and I won the best female presenter award. And then in 2020, I competed in the completely virtual JSC competition, and that was one of the first ones of its kind, and we had a whole week to work. And then after that, I competed again at internationals, and my team won best presentation, not the whole competition, but the best presentation. And then this past year, I competed again completely virtually for the JSC regional competition, where I was president of my team and my team won and went to internationals, where I was also president of my team and we won the international competition. So obviously I've done the competition a lot, and going into the competitions, I wanted to be a lawyer. And after my first space element design competition, I knew immediately that that was what I wanted to do anymore, which led me into computer science. So having been a part of like many different kinds of the competition, every single one proved like its own challenges, but every single competition still like left the same impact on my life. So even though like in person, some of our problems were still communication. That's most of the time the biggest problem, because you're working with a team of 50 kids you've never met before. And so trying to organize that and get everyone to talk to each other can be extremely difficult. And at internationals, we had the combination of cultures as well as different languages, and that changes how you think. So there is a lot of conflict resolution as well as problem solving to try and figure out how you are going to best address the RFP. So that was a problem, obviously, throughout every competition, because that is the main point of the competition, is to address the RFP. So I learned a lot through the competition about conflict resolution and problem solving and working with people who have had completely different lives as me, completely different brains as me. And that taught me so much. It made me grow as a person, opened my eyes to all the other people in the world and all the other ideas out there. And working on the online virtual competition also proved difficulties with communication. Our very first one, a lot of people just never got on Discord and participated. So we had about 8 of us design our entire project, which was obviously very challenging. And through all these competitions, I made tons and tons of friends. And even on the virtual ones where we have never met in person, we have still like developed super close friendships because we're working in that stressful situation together. So that brings you closer together with people. And so I have friends from all over the world that I've never actually met before, but I still talk to them on a regular basis, as well as friends from across the United States.
Okay, thank you, Shekinah. I'd also like to have Samil from our Asian regional design competition do a quick one. We're gonna have to speed things up a little because we're running a little behind, but just keep on going.
Hi everyone, hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yes.
All right, cool. Hi everyone, my name is Soma Varshney. I am currently a rising senior in Amity International School, Saket, which is a school here in Delhi, India. So I'm speaking to you from 12 a.m. here in India. And yeah, I want to speak a bit more about my personal experiences with the SSDC competitions, where I've done a total of 6 at this point of time, with 2 initial qualifying proposals as well. I have done 2 in person and 2 completely virtual, and most recently the international one, which was a hybrid mode. I've participated in almost all of the rungs of the sort of management space, where I've been a normal member of the team. I've also been an HOD, a head of department for automations, which is what I normally specialized in. At the beginning, when I was in 9th grade, I was just learning about the competition. Then I used those skills, I used those experiences to move on to bigger leadership roles, where I was the company president for both my Indian national teams as well as my Asian regional teams, heading large companies of 60 students, more or less, across different parts of the India and later on the Asian realms, to different people from different countries. I think that was one of the most enlightening experiences that I have had in my high school career up till now, because I learned so many things that I would not have learned if I had not participated in such a prestigious competition. And I think it really goes to show how great of a job people like David and Anita have done providing opportunities across the world, not only in the US, where they've provided a competition like the SSDC, providing so many opportunities for students who would not have had these experiences in these real industry situations otherwise. And I think a lot of my classmates, a lot of my seniors, a lot of even my juniors currently participating in the competition this iteration this year are really, really grateful for the opportunity. And so learning a bit more things that I personally learned, or technical skills that I was able to develop, were the fact that in my first time doing SSDC, or my first time around, we needed a 3D designer or 3D developer that, because 3D development or 3D design is such a focal point in providing proposals in the RFP system. What ended up happening was that it was my first time doing 3D design, and since no one else was willing to do it, I took the task on. And boy, am I glad I did take the task on, because from then on, I was able to hone my 3D skills, hone my design skills. And now last year, I was able to work with design studios professionally, where I was creating assets, I was creating 3D designs for them to use in movies and different professional things, and I was able to make money from this. And that was an incredible application that I never thought I could even get to at this point of time. I was also later in ARSSDC, after at least ARSSDC, David had reached out to us and asked us if we could virtualize a settlement that we had created as a proposal in the proposal stage in the live round. And what we had done was that we created a virtual reality settlement in something called a program called VRChat, and we had entirely 3D mapped out what a space settlement in the future, like something like an O'Neill cylinder, would look like from the interior if you were supposedly living in one. And so I think you guys can, if anyone is curious enough to find out a bit more about that, I'm pretty sure we can provide some links, but it's publicly accessible, and it took us almost 6 months to get up and running. When me and a classmate of mine, Raghav Agarwal, we had done the entire thing from scratch using professional studio programs such as Blender, Autodesk Maya, and Unity, along with game developer Aaron Kendrick that we had gone into contact through David, of course. And it was just an incredible learning opportunity that we had never even thought of being able to get to through the competition of SSDC itself, which is why I think it's such an important competition for students in STEM to take part of, because they'll never know how many opportunities or how many new doors might open up for them in the future.
Okay, thank you, Samil. Okay.
Thank you so much.
So Javier, you want to go on with your crew, and or let's see, now we want to have our virtual graduates from your high school there. Let's see. So I think Jesse, you should be next, and just again, try to be kind of quick. How's your audio?
Yeah, I just want to make sure my mic's
good. You're good.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. My name is Jesus Guillen, and I'm currently a second-year college student, a senior by coursework, attending the University of Texas at San Antonio. I'm currently double majoring in electrical engineering and computer engineering with a minor in computer science. I'm also part of the Top Scholar program, which is a 4-year full ride scholarship with a small community of tight-knit scholars. And I've also done research within the fields of data science and information retrieval through the National Science Foundation with the University of North Texas, their data science department. And we're awaiting news on hopefully, our publishing through one of the competitions, so the Text Retrieval Conference. And I also currently work at the NASA Miro Center for Advanced Measurements in Extreme Environments. That's my research lab. I am an alumnus of Homer Hanna Early College High School, the class of 2020, and currently a mentee under Mr. Javier H. Gonzalez. He's also in the call. I first got started with space settlement design in 2018. One of the initial groups to get started in South Texas with the space settlement design exercise led by David and Anita. And this was part of the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley Stargate program. I further got involved within Stargate by attending SpaceCom, so a conference on space kind of economics, sort of a startup type of conference, where that led me to participate further in 2 other space settlement design competitions in 2019 and early 2020. I was vice president in the former and president in the latter. I've also competed in the SSEC, so Space Settlement Entrepreneurship Competition in April. And through these experiences, I gained a lot of different skills that I would not have otherwise gotten, such as stress management, being a good leadership figure, and networking with different people that otherwise you really would have never been able to network with. So I was actually working with a lot of the engineering side, because I was, of course, the vice president of engineering and then president. So because of this, I felt like I got further, I don't want to say pushed, but further, I felt like I really wanted to do something with engineering. So right now I'm actually working in my second lab on circuitry analysis, along with different projects tying into electrical engineering at the NASA Miro Center. I also currently mentor the students that are in the photo right there, or in the video right there, in the Technology Student Association, and Team 1113, which is Operation Soaring Eagle for VEX. And I'm a SEED, so College of Engineering and Integrated Design Ambassador for UTSA, as well as a spokesman for the Honors College. I plan on applying for the Goldwater Scholarship in Excellence of Education this year, which is research-based. And because of Expanding Frontiers pushing me to explore my different options, because before this, I was very just one track. I actually now want to pursue fields in grad school, such as bioengineering or electrical engineering at Rice's George R. Brown or University of Texas at Austin's Cockrell. So like I said, the possibilities are endless. And I would just like to say thank you to Dr. Janae, to Mr. Javier H. Gonzalez, and to David for all the opportunities that I've gotten. So thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy this session.
And then I believe we should have Halil. Are you live here?
Can you guys hear me?
Can indeed.
Good, and everything?
Yep.
Okay, hello everyone. I want to keep it short and sweet. My name is Halil Hamsho, and I'm currently attending the University of Texas at Austin, majoring in mechanical engineering with honors and minoring in a business foundation. And so I'm actively participating as an academic excellence lead in the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers chapter at the University of Austin. And I attended Homer Hanna Early College High School. So it brings me a lot of satisfaction seeing a lot of students that went to the same high school as me, doing the same things and following along the same path as I did. And, you know, to answer the question of ISSDC, personally, I competed in most of the competitions through my senior year. So, you know, the 2021 academic year, the competitions that I participated in were SSDT online, SSDC East Coast online, and lastly, ISSDC 2021 in person. And so for my company, Grumbo, I was part of only 13 members on my team that were allowed to go in person. And obviously, also to include into that resume, I just submitted a business proposal alongside 10 other students, including I have a twin brother, in the Rosblatt Space Design competition. And so it was actually a very unique scenario in the international competition, because as most of the teams were located remotely throughout the world, it was a very big challenge for us to be able to effectively coordinate and communicate, especially with a huge disparity of the members not being in person. However, one thing that I learned throughout these competitions, and that I still apply to this day through the many connections and the many organizations that I joined, is that the importance of effective communication. And what I mean by that, as we all know, it's not simple verbal or online conversation, but it's instead emphasizing that we must communicate very effectively in these competitions. It's not very easy to talk to people through Discord or even in person. And so when you have 20, 40, 80 individuals in a single company, it can be very hard to transmit all the information presented in a single person. So one of the biggest things that I learned from this competition as a marketing vice president and all the 4 competitions that I did, it was that I gained a lot of very technical experience in drafting and executing business proposals, specifically in the aerospace sector. And now I'm putting all of this expertise in a new organization called Longhorn Racing in the combustion team, where I'm going to be part of the sub lead of Frame, where we're designing and manufacturing on our own, in our own parts, literally in the university, a race car, which we hope to win in the next competition. And at the end of the day, if there's one thing you want to take away from this, well, is that I have a huge desire to be a champion of innovation and teamwork and dedication, and a lot of those characteristics I developed throughout these competitions. And at the end of the day, I want to thank obviously Mr. Javier Gonzalez and David Chevron for giving me all these opportunities and obviously creating a path for the future students to be able to develop themselves not only professionally, but in many different ways. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Khalil. Javier, you want to go ahead and have your students in your sequence you want?
Hey. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me well? Already?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I'll get started. So my name is Xavier Gonzalez, and I'm currently a student at Homer Hanna Early College High School. I have competed into the face-to-face SSDT, in which I was the director of automation, as well as the SSEC, which was also virtual. Then the SSDT, which was virtual. Oh, sorry about that. Then the SSDC, which was, the SSDC, which was virtual, then which I actually went to internationals for, which was hybrid. And then lastly, I recently did the Rothblatt competition, in which I worked with David and Samil with. And which can I say, all of this was it was an amazing experience, honestly. And working with people like in the Rothblatt for David and Samil, it was awesome. They're such amazing people, and you get to be open to new opportunities, new experiences, things that you never thought you would ever do. Like with me, I honestly never thought I would get into space. I never thought I had what it would be to qualify for that type of stuff. Or even just honestly get into it. But it's awesome. And then you start to learn about more, how do you say, just opportunities out there, really. You start to realize how much more there is, and like how people have done such amazing things, about like how you can start talking with them, how you have the same interests as them. And it's just an experience that you want to keep on going at, and you just want to keep on pushing more, and you want to keep on trying harder for the next time. It's truly just amazing for what opportunities they have put out for us. And I just want to say thank you to Anita Gale, as well as David Chevron, as well as my father, which, he's currently out of camera right now, but basically just thank you for all of this for us.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on.
Okay. Hi, my name is Clarissa. Oh, sorry. There's another bell. Okay. Hello, my name is Clarissa Montiel, and I'm also a senior at Hanna Early College High School. I've participated in virtual SSDT, where I was the director of structural engineering. And then I participated in SSDC, where I was the director of human engineering. And then from there, we went to internationals, which is hybrid, and I was the director of human engineering there as well. And all of these competitions have really given me just the best outlook on my future, because before I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do STEM, but I just didn't know where I would fit or if I would even be able to, since it's such a high regarded degree and field of work. So with this competition, it made me realize that I'm able to do it and that I can also like fit in there. And it also made me excited for my future. And it made me really optimistic and hopeful for the years to come. And I would like to thank everybody at EXF, including Dr. Rick Janae and Mr. Gonzalez and David and Anita.
Okay, thank you.
Just kind of scoot that way.
Who's next?
All right, hello. My name is Jorge Adrian Hassel. I'm a senior also here at Hannah Early College High School. And I've been fortunate enough to be a part of the inaugural in-person SSDT back in 2018, if I believe, where I was the director of structural engineering. The next year in 2019, we did the SSDT again, where I was the president of our company, and luckily we got first place, which allowed us to move on to the East Coast competition ran by Miss Anita and Mr. David, as well as others, where I was also the president. We won the first place in that, which allowed 13 of my team, including Clarissa and Halil, to compete at Kennedy Space Center in the international space tournament. Where there, I was also fortunate enough to meet people all across the world, and as their president, work alongside them to create a project that was presentable to a lot of amazing people. And from all these competitions, I've learned very much, how to deal with these environments, with these stressful tasks of getting a project off the ground, having it, set out in the way that we can present it to an actual buyer, and learning the processes through that, as well as just understanding, how people think in different circumstances regarding, space settlement and how people want to view it as that. So, and at the international competition, I was also fortunate enough to have conversations with Miss Anita and a couple of other people in the National Space Society about the progress and the history of what they've started, as they were the people who worked on getting us to the moon, on getting us into space through international means of the International Space Station, and how their legacy and their stories and their creativity have gotten us to where we are now, where we're the next generation taking up on their task and pushing even more forward into Mars and potentially even beyond. So it's been honestly a very mind-bending experience of just seeing the amount of people and the amount of creativity and just sheer willpower that it takes to persevere of all the challenges that are presented in space and in industry. And I'm very glad and very proud to be amongst the people that are here and that I've been able to be talking with to where we are now. And I want to thank Mr. Jeanette for designing the design tournament for Brownsville, and giving me and my other classmates and Jesus and Halil and others the opportunity to have that here in South Texas, as well as Mr. David and Miss Anita for establishing the competitions and allowing us from down here in South Texas, going all the way to Florida and to different places, speaking with the people that we have. So it's been very great, and thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jose Morales. I'm currently a senior at Hannah Early College High School and also an undergraduate at UTRGV with the dual enrollment program. When it comes to Expanding Frontiers, I feel like I've actually grown up with it. So my first experience with Expanding Frontiers would have to be the first inaugural SSDT tournament in 2019, I believe. And I want to say I've gone through the run of it all, because in that first tournament, I was just a regular member. So I wasn't like a director nor a CEO. So I've gone from being just a regular member in one of the departments to being a president of a company in the East Coast competition. So as for my experience, I've been a part of 5 different competitions with Expanding Frontiers. So it would include SSDT, which is a design tournament, SSDC, which is a design competition, SSEC, the entrepreneurship competition with David Chevron, as well as Rothblatt competition, which was a business program competition. And what I want to say about Expanding Frontiers is they've pretty much opened my eyes about what it is to be an engineer and working with space. Because before this, I didn't have an idea of what exactly is space or what do you do in space. So with Expanding Frontiers, I've been able to see what goes up into space, such as the ISS. And in addition to Expanding Frontiers, I feel that they've given me opportunities I would have not have chosen before. For example, as a junior, I was able to participate with the NASA HAS program, which is the High School Aerospace Scholars. And then in addition to that, I was chosen for the NASA Moonshot Experience, which essentially is another SSDC, but over a week time span. And with that, I want to say that Expanding Frontiers is just an amazing organization to give us students a opportunity to experience these things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to. So I would like to thank Dr. Janae, David Chevron, and Mr. Gonzalez, as well as all my peers and my teachers for making this experience such a great one and pushing me to become a STEM major. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Who's next?
I'm Indra Garcia. I'm also a senior at Hannah High School. I would like to pursue a career in aerospace engineering. And I was first introduced to Expanding Frontiers in the when I was part of the Space Settlement Design Tournament 2021. It was an online activity, and I was also part of the Space Settlement Design Competition, also online 2021. And where I was working with my team as a VP of engineering, vice president of engineering. I was also part of the Red Black competition just like a little while ago. And I'm really thankful for all the opportunities that we have over here in the Valley. We don't get that many opportunities, space related opportunities. And I feel like I'm really grateful for Expanding Frontiers, because if it wasn't because of all of these competitions, I probably wouldn't have chosen the career that I want to pursue. I want to pursue aerospace engineering. And I want to thank Mr. Janae, David, Mr. Gonzalez, mostly Mr. Gonzalez, since he was who introduced me to this this world, I guess. And thank you for all the opportunities. And yeah.
All right. Hello, my name is Erasmo Alejandro Medeles, and I'm currently a senior at Homer Hanna Early College High School. I first started this at the inauguration, which was held at Veterans Memorial Early College High School. That one, I was the director for structural engineering, and then that one was just a blast because I got to meet a lot of different people, and then I got to meet a lot of different people, and not only that, but it was really stressful because we had to cram so much information in such a short amount of time, and I got to see what it was like as an experience. My second one was the SSDC, if I'm not mistaken, and in that one I was the vice president for marketing and sales. So in that one we had to, as David said when he was presenting the PowerPoint with Anita Gill, that I needed to get all the information from everyone else. So I was constantly hurrying them up, and they wouldn't give me the information because they hadn't finished it. And then the third one, which was when Clarissa, George, and Javi went to international, was the Space Settlement Design Competition. And that one I was just labeled as a mentor because more than anything, I was just helpful and just giving tips on how more or less to do the PowerPoint presentation. And then overall, EXF it's been a really mind-blowing experience. Just a simple fact that I get to be part of this, and then I get to work alongside the minds of Mr. David, Mr. Gonzalez, Rick, and then also Miss Anita Gill, because she was there in the first one as one of the judges, and also as the customer, right? Yeah, the customer. So it's been amazing. It's been a real power trip. And that's how I would describe it. Thank you. Here's my time. All right, over.
The big man himself.
Right.
Thanks.
Students.
Anything else?
Oh,
Javier,
hey,
you
someone
want to add?
Someone give him a chair.
You want to sit down?
Okay, perfect. No, you're out of frame, that's why.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
All right,
Nice.
so if we've got just a couple more minutes, I wanted to give a little view of what one of these competition proposals actually looks like. So I'm going to try sharing a screen and show one of these. This is from the Asian regional design competition. And I'm just, let's see, can you see the screen right now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so this is the proposal that Samil was on. I mean, this is the kind of detail that we see from these students. I'm just going to flip through this really quickly so you get some idea of kind of the level of depth that these students put into these proposals. Assembly, construction sequence, how material is handled, list of the subcontractors, atmosphere, agriculture. It just goes on. And these are all what it takes to meet all these requirements that were in the RFP. So, Samil, if you would like to unmute, you could maybe talk about this a little bit as I flip through these.
Sure thing. All right, everyone. I was the president for this company that created this proposal, and we had to work from top to bottom. Almost 60 people worked on this proposal, working in different departments, of course, operations, automation engineering, structural engineering, and we have the human factors. And so it essentially, the RFP is broken down into these different departments, showcasing how their specific department is working on this points allocated to their departments from the RFP. And so we had to address different problems that were raised in the proposal or the request for proposal. And this is how we went about doing it. As you can see, it's really heavy on in terms of diagrams and 3D designs that are required and how we can visually showcase what systems would be like in the future in case this proposal is actually accepted, as we are technically simulating a contractor or a company that will be creating these settlements in the future. So this is a 3D design that I personally, and another teammate of mine, Raghav Agarwal, worked on. We created this entire settlement from scratch, from using, again, 3D software like Blender and Maya, Autodesk Maya. These are industry standard software currently, and we also recreated it in VR chat, which is being currently showcased by David right now. And this is, we try to sort of simulate what it would actually be like if you lived in these settlements, because right now simulations and renderings are restricted to almost scenic renders or renders that might be 2D or they might be just in a standstill. We wanted to showcase something that would be very more interactive. And so that's why we opted to go for a virtual reality experience where you could physically be in these residential spaces that we had allocated in our settlement, in these residential locations where people would be hustling and bustling around like normal cities across the world right now. And so we created every single building from scratch. We created interiors, we created exteriors, and we try to make it as real as possible to provide a new outlook that isn't really that prevalent throughout the industry right now, especially when it comes to having access to resources, where when we're referencing certain renderings or certain diagrams and things, we don't have this level of interactive detail that we can reference to include in our proposals. And that's what we tried to push the envelope in. And so as you can see, we're trying to this is completely accessible to anyone who wishes to sort of access it. I think David, is it fine if I send a link for this world in the chat?
Yeah, you can
I shall do that. All right. I will be sending a chat link in the chat with a link for if anyone wants to sort of access this world. It's publicly accessible in a program called VR Chat, which is open source, and you guys can find it on Steam. And so this sort of gave us an entirely different point of view when it came to interacting with potential environments that might exist in space, and a new way to visualize these O'Neill cylinder-like settlements that we have to create in these. We also recreated, as you guys saw, the tavern, the Outpost Tavern, which was an input by David that he had mentioned that was a popular place that burned down. And I think to recreate that reality or that simulation. We try to recreate it almost one-to-one, not one-to-one scale, but to the extreme, like sort of accuracy that we could. And we used real pictures, we used experiences. We talked to David and his colleagues across Zoom calls that lasted a few hours, discussing how things were and how they used to be, the layouts, to make sure that we could create it as real to life as possible. And if anyone wants to visit it, they really can, in this given moment in time, walk into the Outpost Tavern, see what it was like. We have the exact pictures that were used in the Outpost Tavern in the 3D rendering itself. So it might bring a bit of nostalgia back if anyone visited back then. There is a link that's been posted in the chat. That is, I think, the world, if anyone wants to access it, of course.
Well, thank you very much, Samil and
No
Lee.
problem.
And
Thank
if
you.
anybody wants to go see, the Outpost Tavern, it's visitable. You can actually, kind of make it as a private world and have a meeting there and go interact and have a social situation with other VR chat users right there in this historical site that was actually used in filming the Space Cowboy movie. So that's it for us, I think. So
I'm wondering if you had to build the Cabbage Patch from scratch or if that was something you could order on a public domain.
Samil could answer some of those questions. We could have a whole nother session probably on just doing the virtual visitable networking facility that was envisioned for the students to be able to actually go gather together in the settlements that they created in their proposals.
Great. All the students did a tremendous job presenting without notes and just talking through everything. Really well done. And I think the long-term effects are what made the biggest impression with me, that the students are making life-changing decisions as a result of this experience. And from the look of the presentation, it must be a little difficult to go back in the classroom and start doing problems again, homework assignments with 24 problems again. But that energy to know that this is what it looks like in real life to be in STEM careers carries you through the tedium of that work. And I'm just really excited to see what you all do going forward. So thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, our next feature is Space Money, where we talk with investors, CFOs, analysts, and economists about money for, in, and from space. While we're talking about money, it's always a good chance to remind you that we are a nonprofit organization that depends on your generosity to advance this programming. If you're enjoying today's conversations, please consider making a donation or sponsoring our next event on the registration page. The website is www.f4f.space. For Space Money, we have Megan Crawford, who was a judge on the presentation, the student competitions and tournaments that were talked about here on our Student Spotlight. She is a managing partner of Space Fund, a venture capital firm investing exclusively in the space startup ecosystem. She is one of the leading voices in the space industry and an experienced space startup executive and founder. She's also the host of the Mission Eve podcast that aims to increase the number of women in the space industry. Megan, thank you for being here, and the screen is all yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I do have a few slides to share. Just wanted to kind of walk through a couple of things, but hopefully I can leave a good chunk of time here for Q&A, because I would really love to just talk to the students, especially more about what I do and kind of answer their questions about this very kind of unique job that I have. So I just wanted to say, just really great to see everybody so inspired and moving forward with exciting STEM careers. We need all of you in the industry, so keep it up. So I am managing partner of Space Fund, as Lee said. Thank you for the great introduction. And we are a venture capital firm. So that means we invest in startup companies. We invest in companies kind of at all stages. but we do focus on very early stage, seed and Series A type companies. And this quote here is from a New York Post article that came out a few years ago, on the back of some of the big banks, you know, your Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and all of those folks, Goldman, issuing reports about the future of the space industry and the huge economic opportunity there. And so this idea that the world's first trillionaire is going to make their fortune in space is based on the unlimited nature of the space economy. When you look at different market sectors, they all have their limitations in one way or another. Space is the only market sector that's truly unlimited, not just in the amount of space that's out there, but the amount of resources that are available and the amount of economic opportunity that comes with that. And so as far as we're concerned, it's the best place to be investing right now. But we'll get back to that in a little while. The purpose of today's conversation is to talk about space settlement. And this is something, you know, this is kind of this image here is a really famous image from, I think it was late 70s or early 80s, from Gerard K. O'Neill, the gentleman who wrote The High Frontier. The book that I think that inspired a lot of the adults on this call, probably. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. This book, The High Frontier, and Jerry O'Neill said for kind of the first time ever that you can go to space. You don't have to be an astronaut. You don't have to work for NASA. You don't have to be one of these folks with the right stuff, you know, as they used to call it back then, that you can build something in space. You can build a business in space. You can build a habitat in space. And so this is the vision that inspired a whole new generation that led to the new space revolution that you're seeing right now. This is, I think, the future that we all want to live in. And it's certainly the future that Jeff Bezos wants to live in. When he was a high school student, he was valedictorian of his high school. And in his valedictorian speech, he cited Gerard K. O'Neill and The High Frontier. And he told his entire high school class, I'm going to go make money so that I can make this vision real. And I'll be darned if he didn't do exactly that, right? So thank you, Jeff. And so this is what we all want to see. This is the future we all want to live in. It's certainly the future that I want to live in. I've volunteered for many years now for an organization called the Space Frontier Foundation that is focused exclusively on settlement. But how do we make that real? How do we actually do this? If it's not the government who's going to do it, how do we actually do it? Well, let's talk about space fund portfolio company Axiom, right? They are putting together the world's first commercial space station. Now, it might not be a huge rotating O'Neill cylinder, right? But this is definitely a step in the right direction. These modules are being built right now. They're going to be launching as early as 2.5 years from now. You're going to have the very first commercial real estate in space in the next couple of years. And not only is it going to be, you know, commercial and a really important for research facilities and science and all of the great things that you might expect in space manufacturing, but it's also going to be a lot of fun, right? And let's don't discount that, you know, the ability of high-end commercial designers to create an amazing tourism experience. It's not necessarily maybe the way that NASA and ESA and Roscosmos and the Chinese space agency, it's not necessarily the way they think, right? And so you have to have that kind of commercial mindset. What is it that people are paying for? Well, they're paying for the view. And so this cupola that Axiom has built into their plans will really give you the best view in the solar system. And so this is real. This is happening now. We have invested in Axiom twice now in 2 different funding rounds. And we are expecting them to continue to grow and create a lot of revenue in the coming years and for it to be very good for investors. But it's not just about the habitats. It's not just about where we're going to stay. None of this can be real without a thriving space economy to support all of these things. And so when we look at space funds investment sectors of interest, there's a lot of things that have to work together, a lot of parts of the industry, a lot of these subsectors that have to be mature in order to support humans living and working in space. And so a big part of that is transportation. We're seeing a lot of really exciting activity on the transportation side. Thank you, Elon. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Richard Branson, right? And right now, Space Fund is tracking 163 launch companies around the world. So transportation to space is being pretty well covered, right? If we think back to the last time humanity settled a great frontier, the settlement of the American West, right? The railroad tracks have been laid, right? And so now we can get there. So what are we going to do with that? We'll be releasing, these are, by the way, this graphic comes from our website. These are our reality rating databases where we go through every one of our sectors of investment interest and catalog all of the companies in those sectors and then rate them on how real they are. So hence reality ratings. So these are available for free on our website on spacefund.com if you want to check out who are the companies that are doing these amazing things in space. If you're looking for job or internship opportunities, this is a great list to start with, right? And so obviously transportation. Communication. Right now, as most of you probably know, all satellites communicate on radio frequency, right? Radio frequency technology is what, 150 or 200 years old? Is that really how we're going to communicate through space? I don't think so. I think that, we're seeing a switch to laser comms, to optical communication in space. So communication beyond Earth orbit, communication between Earth and space. There's a lot of room for innovation there right now. Obviously, human factors. I mentioned habitats. We were just looking at the pictures of Axiom's beautiful space station. But it's not just about habitats. It's also about life support. And it's about keeping humans healthy in lower gravity environments. What are we going to do when we move to the moon and Mars? There's very little research on how the human body behaves in 1/3 and 1/6 gravity. And so I imagine a world in the near future where there are different O'Neill cylinders with different gravitational, different spins to create different gravitational realms so that you can see what happens in 1/3 and 1/6 gravity. Can a woman bring a baby to term in 1/3 or 1/6 gravity? If we're really going to populate the other planets, we need to know if we can breed, right? So there's a lot of interesting biomedical research to be done on humans living and working in space. And none of that is going to be possible without a robust supply chain. Where are you going to get your fuel? Where are you going to get your oxygen? Where are you going to get your food? The gravity well of Earth, it doesn't matter how cheap launch gets. It's always going to be easier to live off the land, to utilize the resources where you are. Getting things out of Earth's gravity well is hard, energetically, financially, it's hard. And so if you can develop, if we as an ecosystem can develop an in-space supply chain where resources from the moon and asteroids are feeding in to the supply chain to create everything from the oxygen you breathe to the water you drink to the fuel in the tank, that's going to really help support us moving out into the solar system. And then, of course, you can't do any of that without energy. So the capture, creation, transmission, and storage of energy, whether this is better solar panels, better batteries, nuclear technology, these are all things that we're really, really interested in. And like I said, all of these things have to come together to build that ecosystem that's going to support us as we move out into the frontier. And so I want to highlight just a few other things real quick in our portfolio that you might not think of as space companies, right? You think Axiom, you're like, oh, sure, that's an easy one. They're building a space station. I get that. But for instance, one of our portfolio companies is a company named Eden Grow Systems. They're commercializing NASA technology to help people grow vegetables here on Earth. But also then once that technology is perfected here on Earth, you can take it back up to space so that we can efficiently and effectively feed ourselves. There's no way that we can have a life on the frontier if all of our supplies are coming from home. Can you imagine taking a covered wagon, through the American West, if you had to bring with you all the food you were going to eat, all the food your horses were going to eat, there's no way you couldn't have brought it all with you. You have to have resources being grown and developed where you are. So this is a really fun and interesting company that's in our portfolio. Another one is Cosmic Shielding Corporation. So they are, again, commercializing NASA technology, brand new technology that's going to allow us to actually survive the harsh radiation environment in space. A lot of times you see these beautiful pictures of glass domes on Mars or the moon. One of our technical advisors, Dr. Jim Logan, who's a former flight surgeon at NASA, he likes to say, no, you're not going to live on Mars. You're going to live under Mars. There's no way you can survive that radiation environment. Well, with cosmic shielding, now maybe you can. I doubt the domes will be clear, but maybe translucent, right? With this material. And so commercializing this material for applications in space, of course, but also down here on Earth. There are a lot of, think of an X-ray technician. How nice would it be that if they had a vest they could wear that would effectively protect them from that high radiation environment that they deal with every day? And so briefly, this is just a quick look at some of the companies in our portfolio. Not all of them are on here. We have a few that are in stealth. We also have a few new ones that I haven't taken the time to put the logos on this slide yet. But we are investing kind of across the entire space ecosystem to build that future that I was talking about that requires all of these missing pieces. And I am representing Orbit Fab, one of our portfolio companies that you see here, that's creating fuel depots in space, so that they can refuel your habitats and refuel your spacecraft on your way to on the habitats. You got to have those gas stations along the way, right? So let's talk a little bit. I want to kind of give you guys just a brief overview of what led us to start the fund. And I'll go through this quite quickly, but then I'm happy to take questions about it afterwards. When we started really thinking about this in late 2018, we wanted to make sure that there was really a good investment climate to start a venture capital fund. And so these are the 2019 numbers. I'm sure you guys have seen this great chart from Bryce. $366 billion global space economy. In 2020, it was much closer to 400 billion. But there's two things about this chart I really want to point out to you. Interestingly, this brown section of the chart here, we'll go back and kind of point it out. So the brown section up at the top there, if we zoom in on that, that's the US government and the non-US government budgets. This accounts for 1/4 of the space economy. And that's important because, one, you can never ignore your government customer when they account for 1/4 of the space economy. And two, this provides a lot of stability to the industry. So even during the 2008-2009 economic downturn, the space industry still continued to grow at a very impressive rate, whereas every other industry had negative growth. That has a lot to do with the stability created by that government customer. Another really interesting thing about this chart, okay, so going back, you see the kind of little green slice there next to the brown. Launch services. Launch is the thing you hear the most about, you see the most on the media. It is 1.2% of the global space economy. It is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more going on there. But the great thing about launch is the competition that has been going on has completely driven prices down. This is what's making space more accessible. This is why you can now afford that railroad ticket to go gold mining in the American West. And this trend will continue as more and more competitors come into the marketplace. So this is what's really opening the frontier. This is one of the biggest economic drivers. I mentioned earlier that the space industry is not really correlated to the wider global markets. We did some research around this. And you can see that the green line here is the global S&P. This is a kind of standard marker of the global economy. The blue line is the space economy. And you can see that the space economy and the wider global economy are not correlated. which in the investing world is really important. So who is investing in space? Well, the majority of the money that's coming into the space industry right now is from venture capital. We have some angel investors doing seed investments, but what the industry has historically been very bad at is debt financing. And so that's something that we're very keen to help our portfolio companies become more comfortable with. If we could get, $5 billion in debt financing into this industry, it would effectively double the available capital. And so just briefly about who we are. We set up the fund to be the bridge between the traditional capital markets and the space industry. Our team came from the space industry. We are space industry professionals. And, we helped start the revolution. We're still making it happen. And we know who is doing what, how, and where. And one of the most important mantras for us is that nobody stays until somebody pays, right? And so if you really want to live on the frontier, if you really want to stay permanently out in space, you have to find a way to do it that's economically viable. And so briefly, Rick Tumlinson here pictured on the left, he and I co-founded Space Fund. He is the original space revolutionary. He's the one who came up with the term new space. He's testified in front of Congress 6 times. He helped create the laws that have allowed SpaceX and Blue Origin to fly. And so very pleased to have him as my co-founder in Space Fund. James Mertz is our resident financial expert and former electrical engineer who went back to school to get his MBA. So he kind of checks all the boxes there. And then my background is on the space startup side and the execution side, building, growing, and selling space startups. And those reality ratings I mentioned earlier are just kind of the tip of the iceberg for the data that we have here in Space Fund. We're currently tracking 2,500 space companies, space startup companies around the world. We've published reality ratings on over 400 companies. We reviewed about 300 active space investment deals in the last 12 months and made 19 investments. And with that, I'd like to open it up to Q&A if we can. And, very much kind of ask me anything situation. If you want to know more about the fund, if you want to know more about my day-to-day life, if you want to just know what my opinion about what I see coming in the future, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Thank you, Megan. After seeing the slide with the portfolio companies, it sounds like you've had a very good week with Made in Space being part of Redwire, which just went public, and Orbit Fab getting some funding from Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin, as well as a handful of other companies. So really exciting stuff there, starting to turn the corner from just being these potential to being real return. So it's really exciting.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're very excited about Voyager and Axiom and some exciting news coming up for those companies as well. And you're right, it's great to see the potential turn into reality. And we're right, we're just coming over the edge there, right? Just coming over the hill. And so a few years ago when we founded the Space Fund, a lot of people thought we were really crazy. And now we're starting to put the numbers up. We don't look quite as crazy as we did a while ago.
Visionary is the term.
There you go.
Good. Well, tell us just a little bit more about the investment criteria. What timelines do you think about? What dollar amounts are you looking for? And what are some key characteristics of companies you invest in?
That's a great question. So, excuse me, we look at companies across all stages. We do focus on seed and Series A, those early stage companies. That's where our expertise is. That's where we can add the most value, helping those companies mature. But we're not going to pass up a good deal on a later stage company. A good deal is a good deal, right? So you typically the earlier stage, our check sizes range from $100,000 to $1 million, depending on what the company needs and how big the round is, whether or not we're leading the round. But the kind of gating mechanisms, the things that we look for first as a company comes into our deal flow pipeline, our tech team and timing. Does the technology work? Does it break any laws of physics. Our friends over at DARPA, we have a really good friend and advisor who's the commercialization manager at DARPA, and he always says at DARPA, they say breaking one law of physics is fine, but if you try and break two laws of physics, probably not going to work, right? But yeah, does the technology work? Is this the right team to commercialize this technology? Do you have all of the things that you need to build a successful business? A lot of times we'll talk to technical founders who have great technology and say, yeah, but you need to hire a CEO who knows how to run a company. I'm sorry, technical founder, you probably don't even want to do that. Do you really want to deal with HR and payroll and accounting? No, you don't. You want to be in the lab playing with your tech, right? So let's hire a CEO, right? So creating the right team to really build a business around that technology. And then the timing. This has to do with market timing. Is this technology, is your solution right for the market? Are you going to time the market appropriately? So one of the reasons we typically don't invest in launch is because the market timing for that is not right now. The time to invest in launch was a decade ago. If you're just now getting around to starting your launch company, I'm sorry, honey, you missed the boat. There's 163 people ahead of you, you know? And so you're looking at that market timing. Is this a solution that is needed in the market? And are you timed appropriately to provide that solution? So those are really the kind of three big factors that we look at.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think of Tesla and I think, well, there were already a bunch of car companies and they, but every now and then there's a new idea that still works.
Right. Well, and this is why I say we typically don't invest in launch, because I will look at something that's a game changer, right? Something that's fundamentally different. I'll happily take a look at that. But if you're just a traditional old, small satellite rocket, like, sorry, bud, you missed the boat.
Yeah. Great. And so now take us back full circle. Actually, there's a quick question in the chat. What type of EBITDA growth are you looking for post Series A funding?
So we can be really, really flexible on this. We don't really have any rails because we look at so many different types of companies. A lot of venture capitalists only do software as a service. So they have very specific numbers they're looking for. A lot of VCs only do hardware. So they have very specific numbers they're looking for. Well, we have several software as a service companies. We have several hardware companies. We have a farming company, for goodness sake, right? And so we don't have any specifications around that. Obviously, we want to see rapid and significant growth, but what that looks like for one company to another can be very different.
Yeah, it almost sounds a little bit more like a family office approach where you can change the rules for the right circumstance.
Exactly. Yeah, we do thankfully have a lot of flexibility. But because of the wide range of the type of companies we look at.
Yeah. Now, take us back full circle and talk a little bit about judging these habitat competitions and tournaments and how you got involved, what you did, and hopefully a few of the students will come in and ask questions. I'll be watching the chat, and we've also given them the ability to unmute themselves so that they can jump in and ask a question if they want to.
Yeah, so I first got into kind of the judging side of this in 2009 when I founded the New Space Business Plan competition. Because at that time, there were not a ton of space entrepreneurs and they didn't have a ton of experience because space entrepreneurship was kind of brand new, right? And so we developed the business plan competition that also has kind of a boot camp aspect to it to help teach space entrepreneurs how to kind of speak the language of finance. And then you put them out on stage in front of a bunch of potential investors and do a competition. And so that's when I really kind of got the judging bug and realizing that the competition format can be really, really useful. Most humans are naturally competitive and they tend to work a little bit harder and be a little bit more creative when there's something on the line.
Mm-hmm.
And in the business world, there's a lot on the line and it's a constant competition with your competitors, right? And so I feel like that's, it's a really good experience. Just the competition itself is a really good experience for, especially for younger folks to go through to help kind of prepare them for the real world. And I find that also being a judge, being able to give feedback and being able to provide encouragement and And all of that is been very rewarding over the years for kind of all the different types of competitions that I've been a part of.
What is the biggest mistake that the student entrepreneurs that you're working with make when you see their presentations where you're like, oh, that team did so well, I wish they could win, but they can't because of X?
It's typically forgetting about the economics, right? You spend a lot of time designing the perfect thing, but if it's not economically viable, it's never going to work, right? And so, I like to always encourage people to start small with big expansion plans, right? That's a great way to be a little bit more economically viable, and also start thinking about not just the ways, like you can create a habitat where humans are comfortable, but how can you create an economy within that habitat? Are you putting in plenty of restaurants and shops? Are you putting, you know what I mean? Are you creating an entire neighborhood, not just a housing development, right? And so, yeah, kind of thinking of that bigger economic picture, I think really helps kind of close the case for a lot of these.
Great. Well, I'm going to give an awkward pause to see if any student wants to jump in. Samuel?
I mean, I would like to jump, but I would like to jump in, but I don't even know what to say. Hold on, let me start the video here. There, I don't even know what to say. Like, what would I be talking about? EXF?
Do you have a question for Megan about judging?
About judging. Yes. How would the now that it's not necessarily because in the first SSDT when Miss Anita was one of the judges, she was really like she was grinding on us because every little thing she got mad at our team because of the fact that we didn't have the what was it? We had ideas, they just weren't in the final presentation that we gave to her. And then she told us if it's not in here, it doesn't count no matter what, if you had them or not. And then from there we learned on from the next two that I sorry about that, from the SSDC and then the SSDT, the other ones that I did, that if I ever had an idea, just make sure everyone puts everything there. But as far as the judging, how would it work now? Because the first time Anita did it, she was really strict on everything. And then towards this third time, she was more lenient. So are we gonna be seeing like more of that like leniency in order to compensate for the, since we're virtual, or are you going to maybe have like harsher requirements and regulations as far as what needs to be in the RFP?
You guys
yeah,
are
go ahead,
working-
David. Thank you.
I was just going to say, you guys have been working on a business plan competition for the Rothsblatt competition, space settlement competition. Were you working on that one, or Samil, you working on that? Did you got any questions maybe for Megan that would be helpful for your submittals that you put in?
I did indeed. I was just waiting for, I think, the question that the earlier student had raised. I was just waiting for it to finish up.
Yep, and we only have about 2 minutes, so go ahead.
Oh,
She can
okay.
answer both of
Yeah.
them.
All right. Just quickly ask my question. Elaborating a bit more on what you had specified when you talked about investing in startup companies and sort of coming to these companies at the seeding round or the Series A investment. You had mentioned something about gauging team expertise and how the dynamic of the team works, especially with a lot more people might be, the founding members might be a bit more technical without the experience of that business aspect of things. I wanted to know a bit more how you gauge if a particular team is the best fit for that business aspect or that CEO role, and if it's the best fit for the company moving forward. And what are some sort of factors that you might take into account?
So yeah, that's a great question. A lot of that just comes from more than a decade of entrepreneurial experience and just kind of a gut feel. And a lot of it comes from, just looking at their resumes. You know, you can tell a lot by somebody's LinkedIn profile. Do they have the right type of experience to pull this off? And in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases, because of our really deep network in the industry, we're going to either know somebody on the team or know somebody who's worked with the people on the team. And so we don't have any problem picking up the phone and saying, hey, you know, I think that in my experience, Tim Chrisman's a bit of an asshole. What do you think? You know, excuse my French there, but sorry to tease you there a bit, Tim. But so yeah, so it has to do with gut instinct, background experience, our experience working with teams, understanding team dynamics. And knowing that founders are going to disagree, right? And so, you know, and helping put mechanisms in place. And like we sit on the board of directors for a lot of these companies. So we can take kind of that operational role. We can help form a team. We can see where the weaknesses are in the team and help hire the right people to fill those roles. No team is ever going to be perfect. But, you know, do you have what it takes to really build this business? Number one. And number two, if you don't, which most teams don't, are you willing to do what it takes to get the right people in? A lot of times we'll find a technical founder who is so attached to the idea of being the CEO that they can't see that what's best for their business is for them to be the chief technical officer and to hire a CEO. And if they're going to be that stubborn about that important of a decision that early on, that's not a founder I want to work with, right?
Right. If we have the time, could I follow up in that question a bit more?
Briefly, yes.
Right. Yeah, just expanding on your answer. When you mentioned that you gauge a lot of the ability of the technical people or the technical founders on their experience or quote unquote their LinkedIn profiles, I had wanted to ask a bit more about, especially in our personal case, we are doing participating in a startup competition and under the Rothbard competition, and we personally do not have that level of expertise or that experience that comes with working in these companies or working with these sort of businesses in like people who've done multiple startups. And so I wanted to ask, what is something that we as students, as high school students going into college, can do to show potential VCs that we might not have the experience today, but we have the potential to go all the way when it comes to sort of attracting investors into our startups that we might have right now?
That's a great question. There's a couple of different ways here. One is to bring on some co-founders who do have the experience. Two, show some breadth and depth in your education. Don't just take engineering classes, take some business classes, take some marketing classes, take some finance classes, right? Show that you really understand the kind of business and economic side as well. My partner, James Mertz, he had his undergrad in electrical engineering and then his master's in business. And so he can see things from both sides of the table, right? So that can be really helpful. And then get some real world experience. I know that I personally, I loved college. I loved it so much. I did it twice. I went and got my master's, right? But it was very hard for me to kind of get my head out of the books and go out into the real world because I enjoyed that learning process so much. But go get a job. Go get a hard job. Go get a job that gives you some real, grinding kind of experience. Go get a job at somebody else's startup, right? So that you have that combination of, not just technical expertise, but business, education, and on the ground experience.
That pretty much answers my question really well. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great advice, and really appreciate this whole long segment, starting with Madhu's habitats and then imaginative thinking, going through the student spotlight, and then closing it out with Megan for space money. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been a great 2 days of conversations for the future with you all. We hope you've enjoyed the programming. And next month, we'll be back on October 5 and 6 to talk about the benefits of space to life on Earth. We hope you join us then, and sponsorships are still available for that event, and you can look at those options when you register. I'm Lee Steinke, and I'm turning it over to Tim Chrisman to sign us off.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, this is exciting as we close out our 10th of these and looking ahead to round out our first year. It's appropriate as we look across the space economy, that the topic this month was sustainability and how can we make sure we take care of, this new environment we're going into, but also how do we sustain the momentum? How do we keep that up? And I think Megan made a really good point there, that we do that in part by making sure that leaders are humble, that we're willing to make the hard calls when needed, put people who know more than us in the positions that are needed to make things happen. And that, oftentimes is a hard decision and a hard thing to do. But as we look across this burgeoning new sector, hard decisions are everywhere. And so if you're not going to make the hard decision, somebody else will. And it's always better to control your own destiny. So yeah, thanks again to the team for putting this event together. Thank you to our speakers. This was amazing. Our next event in our infrastructure series will be September 22nd, where we talk fusion power, specifically space-based fusion propulsion, and then follow it up in October, as Lee was saying, with our next conversations for the future. So look forward to seeing you all there, and thank you all again for your time.